Rights High Commissioner on Sudan and Palestine, among others. We condemn the annexation by Israel and any plan that threatens the Palestinian people. As regards Sudan, it is clear that there is a systematic campaign to undermine international efforts aimed at putting an end to the conflict in Sudan, including in the Human Rights Council. Responsibilities are not being lived up to. There is no effort to bring peace, particularly by the representatives in question.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan. On behalf of God, the merciful, the compassionate, this update reflects a catastrophic situation for human rights. There's impunity, there are attacks that undermine global stability. There are the affected victims, but the world on the whole suffers from these flagrant violations. There is no longer a distinction made between the authors of these human rights violations. The human rights community must adopt measures while ensuring that our actions are taken in step with human rights law. We must return to our joint and shared values to tackle these challenges. We must implement the right measures and thus bring to an end the distinction between between different actions. Efforts to reform our action at the 80th anniversary are upon us. We thank the High Commissioner for his efforts. We work for peace. No one can stop us because we have faith in the future. The future should not be in the hands of these individuals and these traitors. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, no principle of international law is more essential for the promotion of human rights than the principle of national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Experience have clearly shown that undermining this principle through external interference does not advance the realization of human rights, but rather deepen instability and human suffering. The situation in Gaza is a glaring and undeniable example. The occupying regime's ongoing barbaric aggression, including deliberate and indiscriminate attacks against civilians, the inhuman blockade, and the systematic denial of access to the most basic needs for millions of people, constitutes a flagrant crime against humanity. Equally alarming are the recent acts of military aggression by this regime, including its unlawful attack against Iran on 13th June and its subsequent assault on Qatar, which reflect the consistent patterns of violation of sovereignty and international law, threatening regional stability and international peace. The Human Rights Council cannot and must not remain indifferent in the face of such repeated crimes and aggression. Silence or inaction would only embolden the perpetrators and undermine the very credibility of this Council. The protection and promotion of human rights will remain impossible as long as the states are subject to aggression, occupation, and interference. Respect for sovereignty is an optional. It's the cornerstone of peace, justice, and the right of people to freely determine their own destiny. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Luxembourg. Thank you, President. Luxembourg associates itself with a statement made by the European Union. Mr. High Commissioner, my delegation thanks you for your exhaustive and worrisome presentation on the global human rights context. Human rights are ever more under attack in the four corners of the world. As you have underscored, in the case of armed conflict, violations come, these human rights violations are ever too often and ever more arms against civilians, whether this is in Gaza, the DRC, Sudan, Ukraine, or Myanmar. Even in times of peace, we face a worrisome return to these violations of these rights. The discriminations based on gender, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation are repeated and there's zero attacks on the rule of law. We're very worrisome about the rise in gender-based violence. Afghanistan is the best and sad example of this. Women and girls are victims of systematic persecution that is gender-based. Luxembourg reaffirms its attachment to multilateralism and recognizes the essential role of your office in the defense of human rights defense. We support the UN 80 effort aimed at improving our efforts despite restraints. This process is aimed at ensuring that the human rights pillar is not weakened. We thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are living in an increasingly dangerous and divided world marked by displacement, conflict, threats to sovereignty, and a blatant disregard for human rights. We cannot build a secure and just world without human rights. Security challenges in countries like the DRC and Haiti exemplify the interplay between human rights and fragile environments. The respect of human rights is also critical as we look ahead to elections in Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Honduras, and Myanmar, among others. Canada is also gravely concerned by transnational repression, which transcends borders and silences those on the front lines of human rights defense. Security is one of the three pillars of Canada's G7 presidency, a challenge that every country contends with. Security is not limited to the absence of violence. It is about creating societies grounded in respect for human rights and the rule of law. It is about preventing atrocities rather than enabling impunity or amnesty for human rights violations and abuses or impeding access to justice for victims. It is also about protecting judicial independence and reinforcing accountability mechanisms such as the International Criminal Court. Upholding human rights means defending and supporting multilateralism. It means reinforcing our involvement in the UN system and reforming it together, including the Human Rights Council. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин President, we have taken note of the oral review of the High Commissioner, and we note once again entrenched bias and selectivity in its work and the work in UNHCR. They talk the talk of human rights defenders, but Mr. Turk and his agency shamelessly ignore systemic violations of human rights in Western countries. They're continuing a hypocritical practice of putting labels on undesirable states with invented reasons. They're printing large numbers of politically motivated, baseless accusations. And a clear example is the evil anti-Russian provocation in Bucha. For 3.5 years, Russia has been trying to get to the truth about what actually took place in April 2022, when that village fell under the control of the Ukrainian authorities. Numerous requests for information of the permanent representative to Mr. Turk and his agency for the information they have not triggered any substantive response. We just hear politicized attacks and accusations against us. We are not even allowed to read the list of supposed victims. There is other evidence, for example, forensic examination reports, which we've not seen. We ask publicly once again that Mr. Turk and his agency present to the Russian party all of the information that they have, or withdraw and disassociate themselves from the numerous accusations that supposedly put all the blame for the situation in Bucha on Russia. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belarus.
Благодарю вас, господин.
Thank you, President. We have read the review of the High Commissioner, and we share concerns around trends such as militarization of policies, incitement of hatred, systemic racism, violations of the rights of refugees and migrants. We have questions. How does the monitoring over elections in developing countries fall under the mandate of the agency? What about monitoring of elections and election campaigns in Western countries, where we have seen scandals and people removed from candidate lists? We consider it incorrect to set up human rights mechanisms against the legitimate state authorities and states against their peoples. We see selective creation of non-consensual human rights mechanisms in the Council. In line with the preferences of some countries, there are disinformation campaigns and attacks on a known list of countries, Belarus, China, Russia, and other states, in order to change the historical path. Have your reports managed to prevent any deaths or escalations? No, because ignoring the role and efforts of states in resolving crises is a neglect that is counterproductive and produces no results. We need to protect human rights. Peace and security depend not just on the commitment of governments to respect human rights, but above all to respecting the rights of peoples to select their own path with a...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ireland.
Ireland aligns with the EU statement and thanks the High Commissioner for his update. Guided by our own history, Ireland recognises the fundamental importance of the human right to adequate food and to be free from hunger. We are appalled by the famines in Gaza and in Sudan. These catastrophes are caused by forced displacement, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and the deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid. The use of starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. We call for immediate ceasefires in both Gaza and in Sudan. We are concerned by the deteriorating human rights situation in Ethiopia, including narrowing of civil society space and pressure on freedom of expression. We urge continued progress on the transitional justice process, including on accountability. We condemn the reported rise in executions in Iran. The death penalty is incompatible with the right to life and irreconcilable with human dignity. We call for the immediate and unconditional release of UN staff detained in Yemen. We emphasise the need for independent monitoring to ensure accountability for violations and abuses of human rights. In Myanmar, we call on the military and all armed groups to cease immediately all violence and attacks against civilians. We reiterate our unequivocal support for your work, High Commissioner, and the independence of your office. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Rwanda.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have taken note of the High Commissioner's update and reports. It is with grave concern that we address the statement by the Minister for Human Rights of the Democratic Republic of Congo, falsely accusing Rwanda of genocide acts during yesterday's interactive dialogue. Genocide and crimes against humanity are among the most heinous offenses under international law. The assessment and recognition of such grave crimes rests solely with competent international mechanisms based on credible evidence. It is therefore utterly unacceptable that UN premises were used by DRC to advance such an atrocious accusation against Rwanda without any legal foundation. This Council must diligently foster constructive dialogue and permit multilateralism to assume its rightful place, all guided firmly by the rule of international law. Either this Council treats accusation of genocide with the legal rigor they categorically demand, or it tacitly accepts being exploited as a mere platform for misinformation and dangerous propaganda. The UN should not be a venue for dangerous political accusations that undermine the foundations of international law, threaten regional peace and security, and directly target Rwanda's national unity. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Mr. President, Nepal thanks the High Commissioner for the oral update reflecting on the global human rights situation. We acknowledge the role of OHCHR in promoting and protecting human rights worldwide. We reaffirm our commitment to human rights instruments and mechanisms and encourage the efforts to protect and promote human rights through dialogue, cooperation, and mutual respect. Mr. President, Nepal remains steadfast in its commitment to safeguarding all human rights, including the rights of women, children, people with disability, minorities, and marginalized groups. We uphold the human right principle of universality, indivisibility, interdependence, equality, inclusion, accountability, and rule of law, and we are committed to safeguard freedom, equality, and justice. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we thank the High Commissioner for his update, which underscores the grim reality we face. A system meant to uphold justice now shields those who commit the most atrocious crimes while punishing and sanctioning those who demand accountability. This is not mere failure, it is complicity. And when certain states respond with the hollow refrain, we call on all parties to respect international law, we must ask, what law is this? One that serves the powerful and abandons the powerless? That is not law at all, it is impunity. For 2 years now, Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinian people. This is no longer in dispute, yet many states and UN bodies still refuse to acknowledge this reality. People deliberately starved, families erased, communities destroyed, the intent declared, erasure. The facts are clear, so are the remedies: an arms embargo, sanctions, accountability. We welcome the Hague Group Declaration adopted in Bogota, which shows that principled action is possible. We acknowledge that some states have already taken steps in this direction, and we call on all others to follow. For only through collective action can real impact be made. Words alone will not save lives, action will. Let us be clear, member states are the international community. Stop deferring responsibility, the responsibility is yours. If you will allow this genocide to continue unpunished, history will not remember your words, it will remember your silence and your complicity. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Following restoration of its territorial integrity and sovereignty, Azerbaijan has been carrying out large-scale restoration, reconstruction, and urban planning activities in its Karabakh and East Zangezur regions. Initiatives which are underway within the state program on the Great Return to the liberated territories include establishment of a social services network, development of infrastructure, providing decent housing conditions, and employment opportunities for the former IDPs returning to their homelands, providing quality healthcare and education services. As a result of these efforts, more than 50,000 former IDPs already returned to their ancestral lands. Recently, a significant progress has been achieved in the context of the Azerbaijan-Armenia normalization process. On August 8, 2025, in Washington, President of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister of Armenia and the President of the United States as a witness signed a joint declaration which sets a path towards normalization of bilateral relations and establishment of a lasting peace in the region. One of the important provisions of the joint declaration is the commitment to opening transportation and communication links between the two countries, which will benefit not only the region but the wider geography. Furthermore, Azerbaijan and Armenia initialed the draft agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations, which defines the parameters for establishing good neighborly relations. We call on the member states to support these efforts. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone.
Monsieur le Président
Mr.
of the African Group. Sorry?
C'est tout bon. You can go on.
Merci. Sierra Leone aligns itself with the statements of the African Group and thanks the High Commissioner for the oral updates. We reaffirm our strong and unwavering support for his mandate. We are deeply concerned about the persistence of armed conflict, which must be conducted with full respect for human rights and international humanitarian law. We are alarmed to observe that some states are prioritizing war and armaments over peace, creating a dangerous climate for well-being and the future of humanity. These challenges are further compounded by the impact of climate change, food insecurity, and rising intolerance, which are worsened by shrinking civic space, disinformation, and threats against human rights defenders. We reaffirmed the universality of human rights and urged dialogue, cooperation, and adherence to UN Charter. We call for the Council to remain a fair, transparent, and inclusive constructive forum, and to continue to work towards these principles. Sierra Leone reiterates its call for stronger international cooperation to ensure the right to education, health, and development, and for greater investment in prevention and early warning systems and peace building. Sierra Leone emphasized that the liquidity crisis facing the UN is preventing the High Commissioner, the OHCHR, and indeed the Human Rights Council from fulfilling their mandate. We urge all member states to fulfill their financial obligations and to explore innovative ways to ensure sustainable funding for the UN. And I thank you, President.
Merci. Je donne
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Austria aligns with the EU statement and thanks the High Commissioner for his update. We firmly reiterate our strong condemnation of Russia's illegal, unjustified and unprovoked war against Ukraine and call upon Russia to immediately, fully and unconditionally cease its ongoing aggression and withdraw from Ukraine's entire territory. Austria continues to be concerned about the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region and in Tibet. We are also concerned about the situation in Hong Kong and the repressive use of the national security law. We remain deeply alarmed by Myanmar's humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced and atrocities committed against civilians, including the Rohingya. Violence continues despite the ICG orders, and both the military and Arakan army commit grave crimes without impunity. Austria calls for unhindered humanitarian access, accountability and increased support for the Rohingya. We are equally concerned by Iran's escalating repression of journalists and intimidation of their families at home and abroad. Such threats undermine freedom of expression and media freedom. Austria urges Iran to end its harassment, ensure protection, and uphold its international human rights obligations. We are deeply concerned by the repressive crackdown on civil society organizations, journalists and human rights defenders in El Salvador, and call on the respective authorities to halt all reprisals. Please also refer to our statements under item 4 and respective interactive dialogues. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Kingdom condemns and deplores in strongest terms the oppressive Israeli aggression and blatant violation of the sovereignty of the brotherly Qatar, and we reiterate our full solidarity and support to Qatar in all the measures it wants to take, and we warn against the severe consequences due to the acts of Israeli occupation and its criminal violations and its clear violations of all international law principles and international customs. We reiterate our strongest condemnation to persistent Israeli violations on the rights of the brotherly Palestinian people, including the policies of displacement, blockade and famine, in a clear violation of international laws and basic human standards. We equally condemn the Israeli violations inside Syrian territories, namely the recent bombing of a number of areas in the governorates of Homs and Latakia. We insist on the need for the international community to act immediately to stop Israeli violations and to hold the occupying power accountable for its crimes that undermine the region's stability and security. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brunei Darussalam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our full statement will be available on the extranet. Brunei Darussalam aligns itself with the statement made by the OIC and the NAM. We thank the High Commissioner for the update and look forward to his updated report on the implementation of Human Rights Council Resolution 31/36. The database, in combination with the recent report by the Special Rapporteur on the OPT on the economy of genocide, clearly illustrates not only the involvement of business entities in human rights violations in the OPT, but also the entrenched impunity enjoyed by the occupying power. We strongly condemn the occupying power's continued aggression in Gaza, which shows no sign of abating and has led to a grave humanitarian catastrophe. The occupying power must be held accountable for these actions, including its unlawful decision to fully occupy the Gaza Strip, its plan to annex the majority of the occupied West Bank, as well as the illegal expansionist vision of the so-called Greater Israel, all of which constitute flagrant violation of the international law. Mr. President, we call on the international community to take decisive measures against entities that enable and further perpetuate the occupation and to uphold its obligation under international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law, to protect the rights of the Palestinians. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Mr. President, Malaysia associates itself with the statements of the groups that we belong to. Malaysia remains steadfast in its commitment to advancing human rights, particularly through meaningful reforms. Currently, we are reviewing quick-win criminal law reforms to deliver immediate benefits to the public. These include expanding community service orders for minor offences. Last month, we launched the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights 2025-2030. This roadmap aims to ensure that all business activities respect, protect and remedy human rights infractions in line with the UN guiding principles. We are also in the final stages of launching Malaysia's strategic care plan focusing on the ageing population and long-term care services. These comprise the National Ageing Action Plan 2025-2045 and the National Action Plan for Senior Citizens 2026-2030. As chair of ASEAN, Malaysia is committed to helping advance the human rights agenda in the region. At the 47th summit next month, ASEAN is expected to adopt the Declaration on the Right to a Safe, Clean, Health and Sustainable Environment, as well as the Declaration on Promoting the Right to Development and Peace towards realizing inclusive and sustainable development. Finally, Malaysia reaffirms its commitment to constructive cooperation with the OACHR. We encourage the OACHR to continue its efforts to enhance technical cooperation and capacity building programs to address structural barriers caused by economic disparities. Thank you.
Thank you. I floor to the Executive of Ukraine.
We thank the High Commissioner for his comprehensive update. In Ukraine, civilians continue to suffer daily under Russia's unlawful. Repeated nights of terror in Ukrainian cities show Russia's disregard for calls to end this brutal war. Rather than engaging with peace efforts, Russia escalates its campaign inflicting civilians. Sunday, Russia launched drones and 13 missiles in one night, another grim record aimed at killing as many Ukrainians as possible. For the first time since the full-scale invasion, the government building in Kyiv was damaged. Critical infrastructure, power plants, water facilities, hospitals continue to be targeted. Yesterday, Russian aerial bombs struck the rural settlement of Yarova in Donetsk, killing 25 people, ordinary civilians waiting in line to receive their pensions. These are deliberate acts of terror and blatant violation of international humanitarian human rights law. This night, Armed Forces of Poland reported about act of aggression by Russian UAVs. Russia must be stopped, held accountable and made to compensate for devastation it has caused upon a sovereign and peaceful nation. We must act now, not only for Ukraine, but to uphold very principles of justice, human rights and the rule of law on which this Council is founded. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cabo Verde. Thank you, President. Cabo Verde aligns itself with the statement made by the Africa Group. We would like to thank the High Commissioner for his update. We commend the constant efforts of his office to promote human rights in a global context where we see armed conflicts and heavy humanitarian, social and economic consequences. We express our concerns around the financial crisis that is weakening the entire UN system and directly impacts the efficacy of this Council and the High Commissioner's Office, with repercussions on states. In particular, the most small and developing state, Cabo Verde, suffers brutal impacts, droughts, and some rain, such as that provoked by Tropical Storm Erin last month, which led to immense losses of human life and material. This week, external foreign debt, migration, poverty, calling for a solidarity-based human response. We are committed of determination as much as with this Council and the High Commissioner, convinced that only inclusive, resilient societies will make it possible to fully achieve universal human rights. Thank you. Thank you. I recognize Slovenia.
Thank you. Slovenia aligns itself with the EU statement and the Commissioner for his report. Human rights by the Council challenges of our time. We need to strengthen and reform global frameworks, not dismantle them. Above all, we need to defend and protect the most vulnerable. Slovenia is committed to the rights of women and girls and achieving gender equality, the rights of older persons and children, and the right to a safe, healthy, and sustainable environment, among others. Human rights are not abstract concepts. They demand accountability. Without accountability, impunity thrives, eroding the entire human rights system. This is tragically evident in Gaza, where the protection of civilians has utterly failed. The suffering is catastrophic and demands an immediate ceasefire, unimpeded humanitarian access, and full accountability for all violations of international law. From Ukraine to Sudan, from Myanmar to other crises, atrocities remind us daily why this Council must act with courage and consistency. Slovenia pledges, if elected for 26-28 period, to be a principled member, working to ensure the Council is a platform for genuine protection, justice for victims, and unwavering accountability for perpetrators. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Australia thanks the High Commissioner for his report. In our region, the climate crisis is eroding human rights, especially in the Pacific, and the most vulnerable are bearing the brunt. Globally, human rights are under attack. Civic space is shrinking, freedoms are being eroded, and transnational repression is growing. There is an alarming increase in suppression of women's rights and cases of sexual and gender-based violence, including in Iran, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Haiti. LGBTQIA+ people face heightened rates of violence, discrimination and prosecution globally. We remain deeply troubled by the continued use of the death penalty and call on its universal abolition. As the scourge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia continues to rise, Australia remains committed to combating hatred in all of its forms. Australia is gravely concerned by ongoing violations and abuses of human rights of Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories. We are alarmed by growing restrictions on independent civil society actors and human rights defenders, including in Russia, China, Myanmar, Belarus, DPRK, Nicaragua, Venezuela and Georgia. Australia remains gravely concerned by OCHA Special Procedure Mandate holder and treaty body findings detailing human rights violations in Xinjiang and Tibet and the erosion of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. Scrutiny and accountability are essential to fulfil the Universal Declaration of Human Rights vision. Thank you.
Merci, je donne...
Thank you. I recognise the distinguished representative of Estonia.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. We thank the High Commissioner for the update and for unwavering commitment to upholding human rights. In moments of crisis, political, moral or financial, the focus often falls on numbers, budget gaps, staffing cuts and implementation challenges. Yet behind these figures lies the fragile foundation of trust, accountability and hope that sustains the human rights system. We are witnessing troubling trends like rising authoritarianism and attacks on women's rights and independent media intensify. The erosion of international humanitarian law and human rights law continues, and there is a trend of normalization of violence. High Commissioner called for action in response to these unacceptable trends, and we hear him. We also support the outlined cross-regional movement to defend the international system. High Commissioner also underlined coordinated efforts to undermine human rights and the rules of law around the world. We share his analysis and stand strong behind global principles and values. We also would like to emphasize the need to avoid that the ongoing financial and liquidity crisis within the UN system does not weaken the essential human rights mechanisms and increase fragmentation. Estonia, as a candidate to the Human Rights Council, is committed to contributing to the effectiveness, stronger impact and higher visibility of the human rights system. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia.
Mr. President, we thank the High Commissioner for his update. During recent months, the government of Armenia has stepped up its efforts and demonstrated utmost political will to bring about positive developments in our region. On August 8, the Washington, D.C. Armenia and Azerbaijan initiated the agreement on the establishment of peace and interstate relations, laying a constructive foundation for a comprehensive and enduring peace in the region. Armenia remains fully committed to advancing this process, guided by respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the norms and principles of international law. We would like to underscore that the peace must comprehensively address all remaining human rights and humanitarian issues, including the release of the Armenians currently detained in Azerbaijan. Ensuring progress in this area will strengthen the foundation of reconciliation. We welcome the High Commissioner's reference to the issue of detainees in his global update at the HRC 58, underscoring the importance of upholding international humanitarian standards in all contexts. Armenia remains committed to continue its efforts towards consolidation of peace in our region, convinced that durable peace is inseparable from respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I recognize the distinguished representative of Portugal.
President, Portugal thanks the High Commissioner for yesterday's global update. Portugal shares this concern with some states' retreat from multilateral frameworks, institutions and international agreements. We look forward to the High Commissioner's proposed initiative to strengthen the human rights ecosystem. The role of the OHCHR and this Council is ever so crucial. Through technical assistance, capacity building and norm setting, both bodies contribute to strengthening human rights protections with measurable progress. At this critical juncture, we continue to be confronted with the paradox of having to do more with less. The preservation and strengthening of the human rights pillar are both key in the framework of UN80. Portugal will continue to advocate for the elevation of this Council to a main organ of the UN to defend multilateralism and human rights, to fight all types of discrimination, and to call for accountability and to uphold international law. Only with constructive engagement with the multilateral system can we collectively contribute to its revival. Portugal's strong commitment to an effective multilateral system is a core priority for our candidature to the UN Security Council for the mandate 2027-2028. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I recognize the distinguished representative of Eritrea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The High Commissioner's update presents to us a multitude of crises confronting our world. Genocide, foreign occupation, the deliberate propagation of hate, and the systematic erosion of international law. These grave challenges demand moral clarity and decisive action. Eritrea underscores that their root causes lie in double standards and the selective application of international law and the failure to uphold the sovereign equality of nations. The consequences are severe. Billions endure systematic poverty, climate injustice, unilateral coercive measures, and underdevelopment, while the most horrific violations of human rights are being committed against the Palestinian people. Their plight is a glaring reminder of occupation, genocide, apartheid, and the denial of self-determination, all sanctioned by a system rooted in double standards. Mr. President, the selective targeting of certain nations through politicized country-specific mandates illustrates the hypocrisy of the current failing international order. Every nation has the sovereign right to chart its own course free from interference. For this Council to retain its credibility, it must reject such practices and instead address the root causes of injustice, structural inequalities, the erosion of sovereign equality, and the continued denial of people's fundamental rights. Eritrea calls for a reinvigorated multilateralism firmly grounded in the Charter of the United Nations and the principles of mutual respect, dialogue, and cooperation. The inevitable transition to a more just multipolar order must be embraced, for it offers the prospect of fairness, accountability, and genuine partnership.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la
Thank you. I recognize the distinguished representative of Egypt.
Mr. President, we take notes of the update of the High Commissioner. We share concern about the systematic violations in the OPT and also condemn expansion of military operations in Gaza and targeting of aid workers. We also reject displacement. We condemn the flagrant violation, attacks against Qatar. This is a violation of of the sovereignty of states. We also support the sovereignty of Sudan and its territorial integrity away from any interference or attempts to undermine its unity. We support the role of the High Commissioner in view of the challenges facing the UN. We need to avoid double standards and so as to strengthen the human rights system. And in reference to Egypt, in the update, we reiterate the steps taken by Egypt to promote human rights that were reviewed under UPR, including national dialogue and release of those who meet conditions and implementation of human rights strategy, in addition to interaction with relevant international mechanisms. And we have also efforts to consult with the relevant stakeholders, including civil society. We need to take into account national and regional specificities while promoting human rights. We look forward to cooperation with the Office of High Commissioner in order to scaffold national efforts. Thank you, President.
Merci, je donne la...
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Sri Lanka expresses its profound sadness at the recent acts of vandalism in Nepal, and we hope that there will be no further loss of life or damage to property. Mr. President, Sri Lanka appreciates the acknowledgement by many countries during the interactive dialogue on Sri Lanka of the evident progress on the ground. The UNGA Resolution 60/251, which founded the HRC, indicates that the Council shall promote universal respect for the protection of all human rights without distinction and with impartiality and proportionality. Progress made in country-specific situations must be acknowledged, and a way out of the Council's agenda must be created for countries that have made substantial progress. Punitive mechanisms have proven unproductive and lead to further divisions and confrontations. We reiterate that the external evidence gathering mechanism on Sri Lanka within the OHCHR is an unprecedented ad hoc expansion of the OHCHR's mandate, which prejudges the domestic legal processes. There is no mechanism under the IB package that allows for this kind of unilateral external mechanism to be imposed on a sovereign government. Sri Lanka has made progressive strides toward protecting and promoting human rights and will continue to do so. We call upon the Council to afford time and space required to realize these objectives through domestic processes. Our full statement is available on the extranet. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I recognize Nigeria.
Mr. President, Nigeria aligns with the African Group, the OIC, and NAM. We thank the High Commissioner for the global update and reiterate our continued cooperation with his office in the fulfillment of our international human rights obligations. A fundamental principle of the government of Nigeria is its firm commitment to promoting human rights, while remaining resolute in addressing security challenges across the country. All security agencies receive regular training on adhere to the rule of law on the principles of necessity and proportionality in maintaining peace and order. Allegations of violation are addressed through strengthened accountability mechanism and human rights training continuously enhanced. Mr. President, the impact of climate change deserves increased attention, particularly in the Sahel, where it escalates tensions and presents a persistent regional challenge. As highlighted by the High Commissioner, Nigeria is addressing these root causes by promoting dialogue, countering hate narratives, and supporting community-based peace building. We continue to collaborate closely with regional partners, including through the Lake Chad Basin Commission and the Sahel, and to foster stability and protect civilians. Finally, Nigeria remains committed to multilateralism and will continue to promote and protect human rights through active engagement with the Human Rights Council. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I recognize the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pakistan thanks the High Commissioner for the update. We acknowledge the efforts of the OHCHR for their continued spotlighting of global attention on the unspeakable tragedies being afflicted in OPT. However, we underscore that the situation is not limited to genocide rhetoric or incitement to genocide. It is a genocide in every sense of the word. The decades-long atrocities against the Palestinian people must come to an end and a just two-state solution be realized. We also strongly condemn Israel's unlawful and heinous bombing in Qatar and express unwavering solidarity with the brotherly people of Qatar against this brazen act of aggression. Mr. President, illegal occupation and denial of self-determination breed relentless human rights violations. Despite UNSC resolutions and global calls, India persists in illegal occupation and demographic engineering in IIOJK, we urge OHCHR to issue a third report. Adding to its record of brazenly flouting international law, India has sought to weaponize water and boasted of endangering 240 million lives. Its hubris fuels recklessness, and its state-sponsored terrorism continues to threaten our people's rights. Pakistan has long hosted millions of Afghans, yet, as a sovereign state, retains the right to regulate its borders. A liberal visa regime for Afghans remains in place. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué.
Thank you. I recognize India.
Mr. President, we are deeply concerned by the grave challenges confronting human rights globally. India stands ready to work with all partners to address these. Terrorism remains a serious threat in this regard and must be countered decisively. Anchored in pluralism, inclusivity, and democracy, India believes human rights are best advanced through dialogue, consultation, and cooperation, supported by capacity building. Selectivity undermines trust, while genuine engagement fosters shared progress. India remains committed to safeguarding the rights and dignity of all our citizens. In this spirit, as the fastest growing major economy, India leads in digital infrastructure and financial inclusion, processing over half the world's digital transactions while extending healthcare, housing, and financial access at an unprecedented scale. Similarly, we continue to ensure equitable benefit sharing of our technological progress, be it in space, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, or clean energy. Mr. President, India has been and will continue to be at the forefront of global action and discourse on promotion and protection of human rights. We are seeking re-election to the Human Rights Council for the term 2026-2028 and look forward to the continued support of UN member state to India's candidatures. We have noted some absurd comments by some other delegations. We will exercise our right of reply separately. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au représentant de la République.
Thank you. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is recognized.
Thank you, President. Our solidarity is with the state of Qatar in the face of the illegal bombing by Israel. The escalation of actions undertaken by the United States, which has deployed warships in the Caribbean, including a nuclear submarine, is a threat of use of force, and this flagrantly violates the principles and purposes enshrined in the UN Charter and numerous international treaties. This imperils the full enjoyment of human rights for our peoples. In step with the communique from the community of from CELAC, the Latin American Caribbean communities, which expresses deep concern over the extra-regional deployment of military, we call upon the United States to put an end to its provocative actions which threaten national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Venezuela in order that we may preserve peace and stability in our region. We call for the High Commissioner to make an energetic statement against these efforts which threaten regional stability and human rights, seeking to destabilize a zone of peace free of nuclear weapons. We reject campaigns against China, ignoring the information provided by the government of that country. The matters of Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Tibet are domestic matters for China. I thank you kindly.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué
Thank you. I recognize the Democratic Republic of Korea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, people first principle, the cornerstone of our state activities, is thoroughly embodied in all fields of social life. The people's dignity, right, and interests are given the highest and absolute priority in an institutional, legal, and practical way, and remarkable achievements have been made to promote and protect the human rights of the people. We are gravely concerned that the human rights issues are being misused as political means to defame and put pressure upon certain countries, distorting the situations on the ground with disinformation and fabricated data. The allegations made by the High Commissioner in his current oral update have completely lost any sense of impartiality and objectivity by replicating groundless assertions of the hostile forces against the DPRK, thus constitute a grave political provocation and violation of our sovereignty. We categorically reject them in their entirety. We urge the Human Rights Council to put an end to the practice of targeting specific countries and to abolish mechanisms established without the consent of the countries concerned. Taking this opportunity, we reiterate our position on rejecting any attempts to interfere in internal affairs of the sovereign states. We support China in pursuing the path of human rights development suited to its own development conditions and oppose external interference in China's internal affairs, including Xinjiang, Tibet,
Merci.
and
Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now recognize Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. Greece aligns with the EU statement. As highlighted by the High Commissioner, the human rights situation could not be more alarming. We therefore welcome his intention to launch a new initiative, a new alliance, to strengthen the protection of human rights globally. The UN's liquidity crisis cannot justify weakening its human rights pillar. Action is required. In Gaza, the humanitarian situation is catastrophic and requires urgent, immediate action to end the famine and free the hostages. In Ukraine, an immediate ceasefire is imperative and an end to Russian aggression. In Syria, violence targeting civilians must be addressed, including through engagement of the authorities with UN mechanisms. Extreme discrimination against women in Afghanistan, the humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan, and the recent surge of violence in eastern DRC cannot be allowed to continue. Greece remains committed to fully protecting the rights of migrants and refugees and underscores the need to address the instrumentalization of migratory flows and to strengthen international cooperation to dismantle smuggling and trafficking networks so as to more effectively protect these extremely vulnerable groups. Greece will continue working with partners in the EU and beyond to address these urgent challenges and to intensify efforts to ensure accountability. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Singapore. Oman is recognized.
President, Oman condemns in the strongest terms the heinous aggression against Qatar. This aggression demonstrates the Israeli approach that violates international law and sovereignty of states. It is very serious, that threatens the stability of the region. Oman reiterates that these Israeli practices against states or people under occupation is shirking international responsibilities and shows the need for a collective position that upholds international law. And Oman also is concerned about the escalation in Gaza and the serious consequences in addition to the settler expansion in the West Bank. Continued expansion and systematic attacks against the Palestinian property is a flagrant violation of international law and UN resolutions, and undermines any efforts to reach a solution to the Palestinian question, as well as the Israeli political discourse that denies the rights of Palestinians to establish their independent state, demonstrates a serious trend of expansion, of annexation, and undermines opportunities for just peace. Oman reiterates that double standards and selectivity undermines international order and entrenches impunity. This requires action to protect civilians and address violations through international action and for the protection of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Mozambique.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mozambique aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the Africa Group. We thank the High Commission for the annual report and commend the valuable work of the Office of the High Commission in advancing the promotion and protection of human rights globally. Mozambique remains fully committed to the universality and indivisibility of all human rights. At the national level, we continue to advance peace, development, and the rule of law. Despite challenges, including climate-related disaster, violent extremism in Cabo Delgado, and global economic pressure, we are prioritizing and strengthening access to health, education, and social protection, especially for vulnerable groups. Mr. President, we are deeply concerned by ongoing global conflict in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, and elsewhere, which continue to claim innocent lives and undermine international law. Mozambique calls for peaceful solution through dialogue and strengthened multilateral cooperation. We further reiterate the need for a balanced and non-politicized approach to human rights, underpinned by technical cooperation, capacity building, and respect for state sovereignty, in line with this Council's mandate. In conclusion, Mozambique reaffirms its support for the High Commissioner and his office and our commitment to constructive and cooperative engagement with this Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now recognize Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Zimbabwe appreciates the comprehensive update by the High Commissioner on the situation of human rights around the globe. We commend the work of his office in the face of growing human rights challenges. We remain deeply concerned with the continued armed conflict situations around the globe and the intensity with which they are increasing. We are appalled by the continued destruction of civilian infrastructure and internal displacement of civilians in Gaza and Sudan. We call for urgent action and unhindered humanitarian access to the populations in these areas. The rollback on substantial human rights gains and the backlash on gender equality is deeply worrying. Such rollback will have a negative impact on the improvement of women's rights and empowerment, as well as their economic and social emancipation. We believe that the current challenges can be resolved through multilateral efforts, constructive dialogue, and cooperation. We remain committed and supportive to the Office of the High Commissioner. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now recognize the distinguished representative of the Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Mr. President, my delegation allies itself with the statements of the group to which it belongs. We thank the High Commissioner for his oral update. The Lao PDR remains committed to the advancement of human rights in the country and constructive engagement and cooperation with the UN human rights mechanisms. The Lao PDR successfully presented its national report at the 49th session of the UPR Working Group in April, and looks forward to the adoption of the UPR outcome of the Lao PDR during this session later this month. Furthermore, the Lao PDR will present its first national report during the 78th session of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights next week. My delegation advocates for upholding the principle of impartiality, objectivity, non-selectivity and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, in line with the UN Charter. We reaffirm our support to the One China principle and consider that Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang-related issues are China's international affair. Mr. President, my delegation deeply concerned over the critical situation of human rights and humanitarian crisis in occupied Palestinian territory, especially in Gaza, and call for international support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distinguished.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Afghanistan.
Mr. President, as the High Commissioner reported, the Taliban deliberate policies and practices are fueling an escalating human rights crisis. The Special Rapporteur has affirmed that these violations amount to crimes against humanity. The CEDA Committee has expressed grave concern at the lack of criminal accountability and warned that erasure of our women from public life may constitute gender apartheid. Our girls are barred from schools and women from universities, medicine, sports and aid work. Arbitrary arrest, torture, execution and persecution of minorities persist, while journalists, defenders are silenced. Poverty is crushing. Maternal mortality soars. Half of the population need aid, and forced returns push millions into destitution. Child labor, forced marriage, and persecution. In July, the ICC issued arrest warrants for the Taliban Supreme Leader, Chief Justice. In August, the largest coalition over 100 Afghanistan national and international civil society organizations called for the establishment of an independent international accountability mechanism for Afghanistan. Yet, despite these accountability efforts, this Council remains silent. Mr. President, the credibility of this Council depends on standing for justice, dignity and accountability. We urge the members to reject normalization, support international legal action and act decisively to establish an independent investigative and accountability mechanism.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Libya.
ليبيا.
Libya.
سيد الرئيس، بداية تدين بلادي وبأشد
Thank you. We strongly condemn Israeli aggression against Qatar. This represents a flagrant violation of international law. It threatens security and peace in the region. We welcome the oral update from the High Commissioner. We hail the efforts deployed by his office in the area of human rights. This should be done non-selectively and impartially. We condemn the crimes perpetrated by the occupying power in Palestine, which is seeking to displace the entirety of the Palestinian people. The international community has called for a ceasefire and is seeking to provide humanitarian aid. The Palestinian people have an inalienable right to self-determination and the creation of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as their capital. They are seeking to work with the international community and human rights mechanisms. We must ensure that we are able, with the Human Rights Council, to strengthen human rights and ensuring the capacity of the authorities, national authorities, to do the same in the framework of the relevant resolutions. In order to we seek to ensure the upholding of these mechanisms. I give the floor to Zambia.
President, Zambia thanks the High Commissioner for his informative and comprehensive update. We reaffirm our conviction that the promotion and protection of human rights are an indispensable cornerstone to building peaceful, just, and resilient societies. We share concern at the erosion of global and legal frameworks, the persistence of conflict, and the misuse of hate speech to sow division. Zambia underscores that freedom of expression must be safeguarded while ensuring it is not abused to incite violence and hatred. As a country that continues to strengthen its democratic institutions, we remain committed to transparent, credible electoral processes and to advancing human rights education as a foundation for sustainable development. We also recognize the urgent need for climate action, including a fair transition from fossil fuels to safeguard the rights of present and future generations. Finally, Zambia welcomes the High Commissioner's recognition of our enhanced cooperation with special rapporteurs as not symbolic gestures, but tangible demonstrations of leadership and responsibility, reflecting our commitment to constructive engagement with the Human Rights Council and its mechanisms. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Niger.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. My delegate takes note of the report from the High Commissioner on the situation of human rights around the world and the activities undertaken by his office. President, and contrary to the grim sketch presented on the situation of human rights in these countries, my delegation would like to inform the international opinion that the dynamic of refounding underway is an opportunity for people in their sovereign efforts to rally around a vision of change reform is necessary to identify bottlenecks and hindrances to implementation of proposals and solutions, and to strengthen the Republican principles and correct the weaknesses that bring fragility to the governments in our countries. In this process, Niger is deeply attached to the respect for the promotion of human rights. The recurring conflicts from terrorist attacks and recent floods and droughts in our countries in the Sahel and in Africa and around the world continue to undermine the full enjoyment of human rights by affected populations. It's for this reason that my delegation believes that all actions to promote human rights must, to be effective, must incorporate the causes of these factors that lead to violations of human rights. These includes conflicts, criminal organizations, and climate change. I thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Honduras. Thank you, President. Honduras appreciates the oral update, and we agree with the High Commissioner that we are going through a critical point in time. Armed conflict, increasing restrictions of civic space, discrimination against vulnerable populations do give rise to great challenges. Honduras joins the strong calls to strengthen multilateralism and to renew the active and constructive commitment to the promotion and protection of all human rights. This is a crucial foundation for peace, security, and sustainable development. Further, we take note of the initiative mentioned by the High Commissioner when it comes to strengthening the ecosystem of human rights on the 5 points mentioned. On the national front, we recognize the support of the High Commissioner's office in Honduras. This work has contributed to strengthening democratic institutions. It has helped to build public policies with a human rights-based approach. We believe that this relationship of constructive cooperation is essential as the year unfolds. Lastly, we reject the human rights violations in Gaza. We express our solidarity with the civilian population, victims of indiscriminate violence, as well as that visited upon journalists and humanitarian workers that have lost their lives. We call again for an urgent implementation of a ceasefire. This is necessary, and also, rather, we call for unhindered entrance access and access for humanitarian aid and respect for human rights and self-determination of the Palestinian people. Thank you. I thank you. Ecuador has the floor. Thank you, President. My delegation thanks the High Commissioner for the oral update. We agree that it is necessary to redouble collective efforts to strengthen the human rights ecosystem and to protect human rights from all abuses and violations. Ecuador avails itself of this dialogue to reaffirm its full commitment to multilateralism, a respect for international law, and conflict prevention, and likewise our defense of fundamental democratic values such as citizen participation, accountability, and the rule of law. For this reason, given speculation regarding the possible effects of norms adopted through procedures enshrined in our Constitution and law, Ecuador reaffirms its guarantees for full independence of the functions of the state and its institutions. This includes mechanisms for oversight, reform, direct democracy, and participative democracy. We agree that a safe civic space that is diverse and pluralistic is essential for ensuring human rights the world over. Lastly, Ecuador recommends greater attention from the international community on the impact of transnational organized crime on human rights. And likewise, we recommend the need to focus on the need for greater cooperation to tackle these criminal organizations which undermine peace, security, development, and the full enjoyment of human rights. I thank you kindly. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Hungary.
Mr. President, Hungary reaffirms its continued commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights. We thank the High Commissioner for his update. Noting his remarks about my country, I would like to underline that for Hungary, the protection of our external borders and security remains a priority. Illegal migration should be treated at its source by promoting the development in the countries of origin. The Council needs to avoid over-politicization. It's high time to return back to the basis of dialogue and constructive cooperation, including with EU candidate countries. Hungary is closely following the war in Ukraine and calls for its peaceful resolution. We believe in the power of diplomacy. Constructive dialogue based on mutual respect is essential. In this respect, we welcome the US efforts in reigniting the peace talks. I must emphasize again that the war is seriously affecting the Hungarian minority living in Transcarpathia. We are deeply worried about the human rights violation committed by the Ukrainian authorities during the conscription process that caused the death of a Hungarian citizen. We continue to express our serious concerns regarding the ongoing erosion and violation of the rights of the Hungarian community. Hungary continues to voice its concerns regarding the unbalanced approach by the Council towards Israel. We emphasize the importance of maintaining impartiality in
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cameroon. Cameroon signs on to the groups to which it belongs. We thank the High Commissioner for the oral report, and we take note of that developments noted. My country reaffirms its attachment to constant promotion and protection of human rights. This is a pillar of our public action and international cooperation. As regards the electoral process underway, my country would like to reassure the Council and the High Commissioner that the situation remains calm and serene throughout our territory. Peace and stability reign. The political parties are committed to continuing their normal activities in the pre-electoral framework. The government reaffirms its firm attachment to elections that are transparent, inclusive, and credible, in step with the Constitution and other international instruments. To this end, we cooperate closely with Election Cameroon and the Constitutional Council. This with a full respect for their independence. We also with the international partners, first and foremost the UN, in the technical cooperation accord signed in 2025 for the electoral cycle 2025-2027. My delegation takes note of the concerns expressed by the High Commissioner. I'd like to underscore that many of the allegations relayed publicly seem exaggerated and without context. We remain available for pursuing a dialogue that is frank and constructive with the High Commissioner Office, such as we saw with the recent meeting with the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Africa Office. My country is fully committed to cooperating in pursuing that which we have accomplished. Thank you very much. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lebanon. Thank you.
Commissioner for his far-reaching update. Lebanon strongly condemns the Israeli attack on Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity, an aggression that exposes who seeks peace in our region and who perpetrates terror and destruction. Lebanon is deeply alarmed by the grave suffering across the region, especially in Gaza, where Israel's genocide and plans for military control breach international law and undermine any prospects for a just peace. This crisis, marked by mass killings of civilians, destruction, displacement, and starvation, requires decisive international action. We join calls for an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian access, and full implementation of the ICJ's binding provisional measures. Mr. President, as the High Commissioner rightfully noted, human rights underpin peaceful and secure societies, principles that resonate deeply with Lebanon. Despite our own protracted economic crisis, the burden of hosting large numbers of refugees, Israeli occupation and aggressions, Lebanon remains committed to a path forward rooted in human rights, the rule of law, and multilateral cooperation. Our ratification of the CRPD is a recent example. Finally, we join the High Commissioner's calls for renewed global commitment to the universality and indivisibility of human rights to guide us all amid rising violence and divisions. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguished.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. President. We align with the statements of the African Group, NAM, and OIC. We wish to underscore the importance of peaceful resolution of conflicts in order to foster lasting peace, security, and development. And we thank the High Commissioner for recalling this call. The unfortunate disregard of multilateralism and unabated desire of war over peace should concern us all. We must all collectively stand up against this trend and remind ourselves on the undertones and the principles of international law that underpin the United Nations. And amidst the ongoing destruction, we reiterate the importance of the right to development and the need to prioritize policies and initiatives that empower our people in key areas including job creation, education, health, food security, shelter, and water. As a frontliner and one that occupies the front seat of hosting the largest number of refugees in Africa, Mr. President, we agree that there is nothing as bad as war. It leads to suffering, especially of people that are not party to it. We call for an end to this. Finally, I wish to reaffirm Uganda's commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and reassure the High Commissioner that our upcoming elections will be conducted in accordance with established laws. There is no need to fear about it. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Senegal. Thank you, President. Senegal should like to thank the High Commissioner for his oral update. This paints a worrisome picture of the state of human rights in numerous regions around the world. Indeed, armed conflict, the erosion of international law, persecution of populations that are vulnerable, climate imbalance, and migratory problems are the cause of human rights violations, distress, and tragedy. This situation has put to a harsh test multilateralism, particularly as we see that it greatly threatens the full realization of human rights. the full enjoyment of human rights. It is for this reason that we in the international community must, with great resolve, defend a global order founded on law, open, seeking to rally all around the central theme of human rights. This so that consensus remains the golden rule in our diversity. And this includes Palestine, where all forced displacement of populations is unacceptable. This is likely to undermine efforts to find a two-state solution, facing the budgetary restraints that limits the actions of the Human Rights Council and its mechanisms. Senegal supports the efforts to streamline. These must be undertaken in a constructive dialogue with respect for the principles of objectivity and non-selectivity. Further, it is high time to place in the global agenda a focus on cooperation and consensus in order that human rights must remain an ideal of progress and not a factor of division. Thank you. I give the floor to Tunisia. Thank you.
Mr. President, we strongly condemn the brazen attack by the occupying Zionist entity yesterday on the brotherly state of Qatar, which is a clear violation to all international laws and standards. And we express our full solidarity and support to the brotherly state of Qatar, and we convey our sincere condolences to the victims' families. We also reiterate our steadfast and principled position in support of the right of the Palestinian people, inalienable and not subject to statutory limitations, a right to recover their land, to establish their own independent state, having Jerusalem as its capital. We call upon the international community to shoulder its human and legal responsibility to end the genocide in Gaza. Mr. President, Tunisia pursues its path of reform in order to promote pillars of democracy, consecrate the rule of law, good governance, and secure the respect of rights and freedoms to all Tunisians without discrimination. In this context, we reiterate our constructive cooperation with the human rights mechanisms according to our international obligations, while respecting the will of the Tunisian people, our sovereignty, and the principles of neutrality, non-politicization, and non-interference in interior affairs. We also reiterate the importance of having mechanisms to alleviate the debt on developing countries, facilitate their access to finance for development, and to repatriate stolen assets for affected countries. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso. Thank you, President. President, the delegation of Burkina Faso takes note of the oral update from the High Commissioner. My delegation shares its concern over the splintering of certain regional groups as these groups should seek to focus on the priorities of the populations that created them. We are aware of the reality of the Confederation of States of the Sahel, and Burkina Faso seeks to address the cowardly terrorist attacks that are barbarous. We seek to protect human life. We also work within strict respect for national legislation and international human rights obligations. We have decreed a general mobilization which seeks to provide a temporary and proportional reaction to address the current constitutional reality and preserve the nation. To conclude, Burkina Faso urges anew the international community to take full measure of the security and humanitarian situation that prevails in the Sahel and to truly commit to sincere cooperation for the innocent populations that are living in this region and that are victims of unjustified terrorist violence. I thank you kindly. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cambodia.
Mr. President, my delegation thanks the High Commissioner for his update. We expose the grave challenges confronting the human rights system. In this turbulent time, the brief mandate of this Council is understood. Where the peace charter, rise, trample, protection collapse, and humanity is gone. A breach of peace is never only the outbreak of arms. It is the unraveling of the Charter solemn pledge to spare humanity from the scourge of war. Upholding peace and security is not a choice, but a binding duty. At the Cambodia-Thailand border, a ceasefire is in place, thanks to the good offices of Malaysia, the current Asian chair, with the support of the United States and China. Though still extremely fragile, this truce is a vital testament to dialogues over arms and to laws to workforce. Cambodia honors it in both letters and spirit. Yet we remain gravely concerned by continued intrusion, while 18 of our soldiers seized in defense of the ceasefire remain in captivity. Forced displacement in so-called villages, civilian property seizure, and threat of eviction against Cambodian border community stand starkly before us, corroding trust and imperial peace. This action violates both human rights and humanitarian law. Cambodia stands unwavering in its fidelity to the Charter and urges this country to unite so that law prevails over force, justice over might, and peace over war. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I do not see the delegation of Botswana, so I give the floor then to the distinguished representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Denmark aligns itself with the EU statement, and we thank the High Commissioner for his report and reiterate our full support to OHCHR in these challenging times. We condemn reports from South Sudan of widespread human rights violations, including extrajudicial executions, arbitrary arrests and detention, conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence, and the recruitment and use of children by armed forces. The security, humanitarian and political crisis in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger continue to worsen, and we call on authorities to safeguard human rights and ensure unrestricted and unhindered access to development and humanitarian assistance. We denounce the severe abuses in Sudan, including extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, recruitment of child soldiers, arbitrary arrests and detentions, torture and mistreatment. In Georgia, we are concerned at the deteriorating situation and urge authorities to immediately release unjustly detained politicians, journalists and activists and reverse repressive regulation. We recognize progress made on women's rights in Saudi Arabia and encourage further improvements of the human rights situation, especially concerning civil space, freedom of expression and use of death penalty. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chad. Thank you. Thank you, President. The delegation of Chad thanks the High Commissioner for the oral update. We appreciate his commitment and that of his entire team. Despite the difficult context of budgetary crisis, he and his team ceaselessly provide support to states so that the matter of human rights will remain in the center of their policies and practices. As regards the conflict between farmers and ranchers, we would like to underscore that in the current context in Chad, concrete and appropriate measures are being implemented in prevention, management, and conflict resolution around the matters of land and water. The government of Chad, cooperating with all of the members of society in a manner that is open and inclusive, is working on a pastoral code that bears in mind the reality on the ground in specific locations. This inclusive process is aiming at endowing Chad with a legal framework that is updated and that ensures peaceful coexistence, the sustainable management of natural resources, and the security of agrarian and pastoral systems. Chad reaffirms its commitment to strengthen its trust in the democratic process and consolidate the Republic's institutions while contributing to national stability. Chad reiterates its availability and willingness to fully cooperate with the Human Rights Council, this mechanism and its procedures. I thank you very much. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the delegation of Tajikistan. Or rather, I do not see that delegation, and I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malta aligns itself with the EU statement. We thank the High Commissioner for his oral update. Malta expresses its deep concern on the deteriorating situation in Sudan and reiterates our call for an immediate cessation of all violence for all parties to the conflict, to take all necessary decisions to protect all human rights. Malta expresses its deep concern on the continuing devastating attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza by Israel. The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza has reached unprecedented levels. We urge Israel to refrain from taking any decisions that only serve to precipitate further the catastrophic situation and to ensure that humanitarian aid is promptly allowed access and in sufficient quantities to serve Gaza's needs. As announced on 31st July 2025 in New York, Malta will formally recognize the State of Palestine later this month during the UN General Assembly meeting. High Commissioner, Malta continues to fully support the vital and independent work of your office. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, High Commissioner, for your update. The famine in Gaza is a man-made crisis and a moral outrage. Israel must immediately lift restrictions on aid. We urge the parties to agree a ceasefire. That is the path to ending the suffering in Gaza, securing the release of hostages and delivering a framework for lasting peace. The UK condemns settlement expansion and violence by extremist settlers. The situation in Ukraine is unspeakable. Russian forces have tortured civilian detainees and prisoners of war, illegally deported and militarized Ukrainian children, and carried out targeted attacks on civilian infrastructure. These are not isolated incidents. According to UN reporting, many of these amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. 3 years since the High Commissioner's Office's report on Xinjiang, we would welcome their assessment of the steps China has taken to implement its recommendations. We also urge China to take meaningful steps to address allegations of forced labour, arbitrary detention and restrictions on religious and cultural freedoms. Independent access and transparent auditing in Xinjiang, along with the release of arbitrarily detained individuals, are urgently needed and long overdue. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now recognize Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Latvia aligns itself with the EU statement. We reaffirm our commitment to international human rights and humanitarian law, as well as firm support for the strengthening of the UN human rights system. We are deeply concerned by the magnitude and severity of human rights and fundamental freedoms violations, gender oppression, the erosion of civic space, violations committed on national security and counter-terrorism grounds, and the weaponization of food are pressing issues that demand our attention. While the situations in Afghanistan, Sudan, Middle East, Russia, Belarus, Georgia, and other regions are challenging, even dire, they are not irreversible. Another future is possible. Intentional attacks against civilians and non-military targets constitute war crimes. The recent brutal attacks by Russia on Ukrainian cities, resulting in the loss of innocent lives, once again demonstrate a calculated campaign of terror and destruction. We strongly condemn such actions and urge Russia to cease this war of aggression. Latvia reaffirms its unwavering support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity. International law is not optional. It is a fundamental obligation. Latvia will continue to uphold the fundamental principles of international law at the Human Rights Council and during its upcoming term on the UN Security Council. I thank you.
Merci. Ceci était la dernière.
Thank you. That was the last speaker on the list. I can't explain what is happening with the lights. We're working on it, but I can inform you that thanks to the flexibility of our technicians and the interpreters also, we are able to continue extending our session to 13:15. I apologize for shortening your lunch break, but this will allow us to catch up as we've fallen back with respect to our program of work. Thank you for your understanding. We now move on to the non-governmental organizations, and I would like to give the floor to Americans for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain. This will be a joint video statement.
Mr. President, 2025 Ashura season in Bahrain witnessed a dangerous escalation and violation of religious freedoms, reflecting entrenched policies of sectarian discrimination against Shia citizens. and this undermines the right to freedom of religion and belief as per the Constitution and ICCPR. The authorities in Bahrain launched the largest campaign in years, issuing over 60 summonses and arrests targeting preachers, leaders and others, including minors, for participating in religious gatherings. Security forces raided more than 15 areas, removed statues and banners, and desecrated historic Shia religious sites such as Al-Khawaja Mosque and Manama. The most serious incident occurred in Duraz, where security personnel brutally assaulted Hassan Al-Anfuz during a peaceful protest. He sustained a fractured skull and a cerebral hemorrhage, leaving him in a prolonged coma and unable to speak or walk. This took place amid total impunity. Mr. President, this exposes the stark contrast between the government's rhetoric claiming that Ashura season passed successfully without incident and the reality of continued repression and sectarian targeting. All these violations call for immediate actions to safeguard religious freedoms and to bring an end to Bahrain's policy of impunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to International Council Supporting Fair Trial and Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to align ourselves to all those who denounced the Israeli attack on the state of Qatar. And we would like to thank the High Commissioner for following the situation of human rights in Kuwait, as well as its efforts and the efforts of its staff to examine the situation in Syria. The Syrian people in its revolution did not revolt against the living conditions. Syria is still living under poverty line and still lacks security and stability. That's why we hope that justice and equality will prevail for all the components of the Syrian people. We should remind the de facto authorities in Syria that they should respect the principles of international protection and protecting foreign investment and allowing foreign investors to take all necessary legal procedures in order to protect its investment. We remind you of the importance of the Arab institution to secure investments and another institution in Qatar, because the ones who are in charge of economy in Syria today are listening to the corrupt ones and are targeting the investors who have survived in Syria because they care for the people of Syria. We will continue to follow up the situation.
Since 1948, the Sri Lankan state has carried out war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of genocide against the Elam Tamil people. Even today, the Sri Lankan state is engaged in continuous subjugation of the Elam Tamil people, threatening their safety and existence, resulting in the ongoing Tamil genocide. None of the perpetrators responsible for these mass atrocious crimes have been held accountable. This reflects the deeply entrenched impunity within Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's state-owned domestic mechanisms have consistently and miserably failed and leave no hope for the delivery of accountability of any form and of meaningful remedial justice. This makes it unmistakably clear that only a fully internationally owned, credible, independent investigation and prosecutorial mechanism has the truth and confidence of the victim and survivors of the Tamil genocide is needed. In recent discovery, mass grave site Cheminai stands as one of the painful testament to the genocide endured by Elam Tamil people. We urge the international community to establish a fully internationally owned mechanism that will ensure international accountability and deliver long overdue remedial justice. A permanent political solution based on the Tamil Elam people's inalienable right to self-determination. One that addresses Elam Tamil people's legitimate political aspiration will only contribute to sustainable peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now recognize the International Bar Association by video.
The International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute remains concerned that the situation of the Uyghurs continues to receive little to no attention at the Human Rights Council, including the OHCHR report commissioned by the former High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet identify gross human rights violations in Xinjiang. From forced indoctrination camps, many Uyghurs have been moved to forced labor camps. In July 2025, the Joint Committee on Human Rights in the UK Parliament made concerning findings of modern-day slavery in the supply chain in China. The report raised the concern that 1 in 5 garments made from cotton have been linked to forced labor in the Xinjiang area of China. In addition, evidence suggests that DPRK workers are being subjected to forced labor on Chinese fishing vessels. Allegedly, this is part of the PRK strategy to export its citizens as forced laborers to raise funds for the regime, including its weaponry programs. These goods are ultimately being sold on the markets of Europe and the United States. The situation must be addressed by this Council. We call on this Council to, without any further delay, decide to have updates, follow-up, in-depth discussion or an intersessional debate on the findings of the OHCHR report and responses needed. Enhance monitoring of and public reporting on the human rights situation in Xinjiang, ensure that the voices of victims and survivors are heard and are fully involved in all decisions that concern them. I thank you.
Merci.
I thank you, and I give the floor to the Egypt Peace for Development and Human Rights.
Mr. President, Sudan is facing a severe humanitarian crisis since the Sudanese army dismantled the institution of civilian governance, curtailed population participation in managing state affairs and policies, and deepened political social fragmentation and instability. This has been compounded by massacre at Al Jazeera and Yala, South Darfur, which included aerial bombardment and targeting of civilians and vital infrastructures with barrel bombs in more than 200 attacks during 2024, resulting in thousands of deaths and injuries, widespread destruction of civilian lives, and essential infrastructure. Mr. President, the Sudanese Army and the Sudan Liberation Movement, along with their allies, are employing systematic repressive methods against civilians to impose full control over residential areas. The Sudanese army has also engaged in retaliatory and exclusionary policies that deepen divisions and obstruct peace and development, as demonstrated by the aerial targeting of the main market in Saraf, Omra, with 2 barrel bombs in November 2024. Mr. President, we call upon the Human Rights Council to assume the responsibility in supporting the transfer of powers to civilian government that represents all the people, and to link international support provided to the Sudanese army to its respect for human rights and building of transparent civilian institutions. We also stress the urgent need to support accountability and end impunity for the crimes and violations committed by the Sudanese army and its allies against civilians, and to refrain from granting international legitimacy to military rule in Sudanese. Thank you.
Thank you. War Resisters International has a video statement.
Mr. President, High Commissioner, we express our profound concern for the increasing violation of human rights, which are continuously reporting the current repeated attempts to undermine international law, and in particular the human rights system and thus the UN funding principles. We are seriously alarmed by the current wars and massacres in different countries. What is happening in Gaza has been defined as genocide. Many individuals around the world object to war and refuse to kill. The human right to conscious objection to military service is inherent to the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Although it is thus universal and not derogable, it is constantly violated in many countries, and hundreds of individuals are persecuted and forced to seek protection abroad. WRI will offer a side event on this right in times of war on Monday 15 at 1 p.m. in Concordia 1. Eritrea enforces a de facto indefinite national service. The European Court for Human Rights has defined the condition of conscience objectors in Turkey as civil death. In Israel, objectors are sentenced to repeated disciplinary punishment in military prison. In the context of the ongoing war of aggression of the Russian Federation in Ukraine and the forced mobilization in the Russian-occupied territories, refusal to serve could end in punitive fines or detention. WRI, together with Connection EV, wishes this Council good, productive work to set a steady and swift pace on the road to the protection and full implementation of human rights, so that there may be a renewed and clear commitment from this plenary to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Radek.
Mr. President, allow me to draw your attention to the suffering of civilians under the control of
armed groups. As a Sahrawi refugee suffering from detention in the Tindouf camps in the south of Algeria, where civilians for more than 5 decades suffering from a stifling military blockade, turning these camps as a mass incarceration, where Polisario, with complicity with the Algerian army, commits all violations against civilians in terms of abduction, arbitrary detention, torture, forced disappearance, and retaliation against activists who try to end this silence around the camps. We have recorded more than 30 cases of extrajudicial killings, most of whom are young people who were killed by the Algerian army because they tried to end this military siege around the camps. And the families of victims of secret detention centers have run by Polisario have recorded more than 131 cases of forced disappearances that were not investigated by the authorities of the host country. This is a violation of all international norms, including the right to life. Mr. President, the continuation of this illegal situation begs the question regarding the credibility of international system for the protection of human rights. Therefore, we call on your august council. The President interrupts.
High Commissioner, my name is Paul Divakar, representing the Inclusivity Project and the Global Forum of Dissent Communities. Across the world, more than 270 million people, Dalits in South Asia, Burakumin in Japan, Haratin in Mauritania, Quilombola in Brazil, Osu in Nigeria, and Roma across the Europe continue to face systemic discrimination based on work and descent. The UPR, the treaty bodies, and the special procedures have repeatedly acknowledged these realities, but concrete reforms are rare and accountability is weak. Whether in the segregation of Roma children, the persistence of manual scavenging, or slavery-like practices against Haratin, or forced evictions of Quilombola communities. During the last 2 sessions, you have rightly addressed the rights of these communities. Likewise, OHCHR is taking stock of such reality. It is time now, an opportunity for the members of the Council to reflect on new standards, to address discrimination based on work and descent as a distinct, cross-cutting and intersectional human rights concern, providing coherence for states, remedies for victims, and accountability for implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Arab European Forum for Dialogue and Human Rights, also a video statement.
President, the rights of persons with disabilities continue to face challenges. 1.3 billion people are suffering from gaps in terms of education, work, and political participation. There are reports in 2025 that indicate that SDG indicators with regard to disabilities are not going in the right direction. There are risks of poverty, violence, and marginalization. This prompts international community to take efforts for reintegration. The UAE is a good model that adopts a comprehensive approach based on dignity and empowerment, and also based on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We enacted Law number 29 in 26 and adopted national strategies for reintegration, and we have developed monitoring mechanisms and institutions while providing job opportunities and education. We also provide psychosocial support, and there are regional and international contributions to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. We recommend you to encourage countries to review their legislative policies to be in line with international agreements in order to document violations, especially in armed conflict areas, in order to reintegrate persons with disabilities benefiting from the pioneer experience of the UAE. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, and give the floor to Forum for Development and Human Rights Dialogue, also video.
President, we thank the High Commissioner for the oral update, and we would like to draw your attention to the flagrant violations by the Houthi militias against civilians in Yemen, especially women who are most vulnerable. President, we recall the fact that Houthis continue to detain women despite international calls for their release. And this includes Intisar Hamadi, who was detained in February 2021 and who was sentenced to 5 years, and also Fatma Saleh Aroli, and also the coordinator of the OHCHR, and those who were detained in July 2022. These are cases as part of a systematic pattern of repression by Houthis. The coalition named Women for Peace in Yemen have documented 1,893 cases of abduction. This includes 405 cases of women detained in the central jail or prison in Sana'a. And there are also 193 death sentences against women. Some women were subjected to rape in order to give confessions. We call on your council to bring pressure to bear on the Houthi militias in order to release all detained women. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Village Uni.
Thank you, Chair. United Villages welcome the update by High Commissioner on global human rights situation. However, we were expecting that human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir will get specific attention, especially after the false flag operation in Pahalgam, leading to threat of nuclear war. Mr. President, we always bringing the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir to the Council's attention, highlighting violations and seeking meaningful engagement. Despite the first report in 2018 and second in 2019 by the Office of the High Commissioner, which underscored the need for accountability and redress, regrettably no concrete action has been taken. The situation on the ground remains dire. Jammu Kashmir remains inaccessible to human rights organizations, humanitarian agencies and independent media, exacerbating concerns about human rights abuses. The black law in place continues to grant impunity to armed forces while Kashmiri civilians face severe restriction on fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, assembly and association. The political leadership continues to be detained away from their homes for years, precluding their families from meeting them. Courts continue to defy the principles of speedy and fair trial. The process of disempowering Kashmiris continues unabated, and Jammu Kashmir remains one of the largest militarized zones in the world. We urge this Council to take concrete and meaningful action to address the human rights situation in Jammu.
Thank you. I give the floor to East and Horn of Africa human rights defenders.
President, we are deeply concerned about the situation in Ethiopia. Multiple conflicts are raging across the country, and should I start again? Thank you. As grievances related to previous violence and IDPs remain unaddressed, the stalled transitional justice process shows the utter dereliction of duty by national institutions in delivering justice and accountability. The run-up to 2026 elections is marked by instability as the crackdown on civic space is reaching systemic closure levels. Journalists, academics and defenders are leaving the country. A proposed revision of the Civil Society Proclamation is of utmost concern as it would annihilate the very concept of civil society. 2 years ago, this Council gave Ethiopia the benefit of the doubt. Now, there is no doubt anymore. Ending the ICRI's mandate was a mistake. Collective action on Ethiopia leading to a new resolution is needed. Mr. President, in Tanzania, we reiterate our condemnation of the treatment meted out to observers who traveled to the country for a court hearing. Despite commitments, there have been no investigations into allegations of torture and sexual abuse against journalist Agatha Atuhaire and activist Boniface Mwangi. We join our voice to that of the ACHPR, which expressed concern over a range of violations and called on authorities to investigate, prosecute those responsible, protect civil society actors, and create conducive conditions for peaceful, free, fair, and transparent elections. We urge states and the High Commissioner to pay close attention to developments in Tanzania. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I now give the floor to World Evangelical Alliance.
Mr. President, the World Evangelical Alliance welcomes the High Commissioner's oral update and his report on Sri Lanka. We acknowledge some progress toward a more inclusive political discourse, However, serious concerns remain. Structural patterns of abuse persist, including arbitrary arrests under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, custodial deaths, and the harassment of civil society actors. Disputes over religious sites and restrictions on worship continue to undermine freedom of religion or belief for minority communities. We urge OHCHR to press the government of Sri Lanka to take immediate steps to address these abuses and are encouraged to hear that the government is committed to doing so. Further, the government should ensure transparent exhumations of mass graves with the support of international expertise and demonstrate credible progress in resolving emblematic human rights cases. We further call on OHCHR to advocate for comprehensive security sector reforms and the creation of an independent institution with a clear mandate to investigate and prosecute serious crimes committed by law enforcement officials. Such an institution must be impartial, effective, and fully committed to delivering justice for victims of human rights violations. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la
Thank you. I now give the floor to United Nations Watch.
Mr. President, we have heard a lot about international law from the world's worst violators of international law. It's time to challenge the perpetrators. And so we ask Qatar, if you don't want targeted bombings against terrorists in your capital, why do you harbor terrorists in your capital? Terrorists who are still holding hostages, torturing them, and rejecting peace deals. Why did you host Hania, Mashal, and Al-Khaya in luxury hotels from where they planned their terror? Why did you back Hamas's Gaza coup in 2007? Why have you funneled billions since then, fueling their terror machine, empowering their 5 wars against Israel? Why did you blame Israel for October 7th, absolving Hamas of massacring 1,200 Israelis, Americans, and others? Why is your state-owned Al Jazeera serving as the terror group's non-stop propaganda arm? Why do you act as a mediator by day and a terror sponsor by night? Mr. President, the record shows Qatar is a state sponsor of terror. The Gulf states said so in 2017 when they suspended ties with Qatar. Now, yesterday, Antonio Guterres and French President Macron condemned Israel. But when the U.S. killed bin Laden in Pakistan, the UN chief at the time celebrated that, quote, justice has been done to such a mastermind of international terrorism. France called it a victory for all democracies. We ask both. How is this different? Now, when Israel captured the Nazi Adolf Eichmann, rescued the hostages at Entebbe, and destroyed Saddam's nuclear reactor, the UN condemned Israel. Each time...
Sorry, I have a point of order. Sorry, a delegation of Pakistan. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. While we believe in constructive engagement with the civil society organizations and value their inputs, we urge you to ensure that no speaker violates the principles and purposes of the UN Charter and the territorial integrity of sovereign member states. We reject casting unfounded accusations and allegations. This August forum should not be allowed to be misused, especially by those who doctor videos, who doctor narratives, and now doctor facts. I thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I would like to invite all of us to respect the tone that is commensurate with the important responsibility of this Council. I also remind everybody that points of order are on procedural issues, not on substantive issues. I give the floor back to United Nations Watch for 4 seconds.
And Pakistan is another state sponsor of terror, so we thank their contribution.
Je donne la parole à Action.
Thank you. I give the floor to Action for Development.
Mr. President, I thank the High Commissioner for his reports presented earlier to this Council, including on Afghanistan. We share his concerns that none of the so-called temporary restrictions on rights and freedoms have been reversed despite persistent calls. Instead, they turned into the de facto laws depending operation and gender segregation. The loss of foreign aid and restrictions on women employment have created additional discriminatory hurdles. Horrible examples surfaced last week as many female victims of the devastating earthquake lost their lives due to the lack of female health and rescue workers and the denial of assistance by male ones. Mr. President, addressing the situation requires more than just a statement of solidarity. Echoing High Commissioner's call, holding perpetrators accountable through all available processes remains essential. Codification of gender apartheid as a crime against immunity offers one such venue. Finally, to prevent further violations, the Human Rights Council can and should establish an independent mechanism for Afghanistan, capable of investigations and evidence preservation during decision. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Association of Horrors.
بداية أشكر المفوض السامي لحقوق الإنسان على الإحاطة الشفوية.
Thank you, President. I would like to thank the High Commissioner for the oral presentation on human rights violations across the world, notably in Yemen. I would like to draw your attention to the gravity of violations committed by Houthi militias in Yemen. There is a campaign of arbitrary arrests being conducted against them. There is also a campaign with respect to employees of international organizations. Last month, the Houthi launched a campaign of arrests against members and advocates protecting the people. These have been targeted with the goal of imposing the vision of the Houthis. The group has also launched arrests in January 2025, and those arrests affected a number of employees last year, including UN personnel. Last month, a human rights organization identified a number of cases of torture, notably a World Food Programme employee during serious conditions of detention. This was condemned clearly by the Council, demanding the immediate release. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
شكرا الكلمة لسيراك.
Sirac is recognized.
Señor presidente, nuestra organización alerta sobre la grave.
Addressing the serious situation faced by the people in Tindouf camp, controlled by the Polisario. The most emblematic case is that of Khalid, a human rights defender, abducted in Tindouf by the Algerian forces in complicity with the Polisario as a result of his abuses against the abuses and corruption in the camps. This enforced disappearance, which lasts now more than 15 years, shows the brutal repression of those against those who report these abuses in the camps. The direct responsibility of Algeria protecting people in their territory. There is silence surrounding this case. It shows a clear will to perpetuate impunity and to intimidate those who suffer threats in the Tindouf camps. President, these practices undermine the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. Algeria is party to that, as well as the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. We urge this Council to demand the full truth on this individual's whereabouts and to activate the mechanisms to pressure the authorities involved. The family and all families of the disappeared have the rights to truth and justice. We thank you for your kind attention.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Al Bashir Foundation.
Mr. President, we thank the High Commissioner for his report and share concern expressed regarding shrinking civic space and the targeting of human rights defenders worldwide. Nowhere is this more evident than in Western Sahara, where arbitrary detention remains as a systematic tool of repression. Sahrawi human rights defenders, journalists and students continue to face detention without legal basis, ill treatment and unfair trial. Short-term detention, often undocumented, are used to intimidate communities and silence peaceful dissent. The case of Gdaymizi Group, the journalist Khatari Deddah, and of course the human rights defender Al-Hussein Al-Brahimi exemplify this policy of criminalization legitimate expression. Despite funding from the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, Morocco has failed to provide remedies or ensure accountability. In line with this, or in line with the High Commission call for stronger protection of civic freedom, we urge the Council to demand the immediate release of all Sahrawi political prisoners, press Morocco to comply with international fair trial standards, guarantee the unhindered access to Western Sahara for UN mechanism and independent observers. Mr. President, accountability and access are essential to prevent arbitrary detention from continuing as an unchecked tool of political repression in Western Sahara. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I recognize international support for human rights.
Mr. President, sorcery accusation-related violence SAV remains one of the most pressing social and human rights challenges in Papua New Guinea today. Research conducted in Enga, Simbu, and Eastern Highlands provinces show that SAV disproportionately affects vulnerable groups, particularly women, children, the elderly, and survivors without family. Communities suffer widespread trauma, displacement, and the social breakdown. Healthcare workers are frontline responders but remain overstretched and under-resourced. Vivat International and the Melanesian Institute for Pastoral and Socio-Economic Services therefore call on the PNG government to update national health policy so as to provide free treatment and medical support for SAV survivors, establish dedicated SAV safe houses in high-risk provinces, integrate SAV into the national health data systems, recruit and train specialist trauma counselors, screen health worker applicants for discriminatory beliefs in sorcery, develop written SAV response policies in health facilities, strengthen church-state collaboration on SAV response, raise awareness on biomedical causes of death, and support education and reintegration programs for orphaned and displaced children. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. We have heard the representative of Vivat International, and now we will have a video statement from the Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development. Thank you.
We thank the High Commissioner for his update, as well as the report on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka demonstrates the crucial role of the High Commissioner's office with the backing of this council in amplifying demands of victims and survivors for justice. With no credible domestic mechanisms, the High Commissioner's ongoing work, in particular through evidence gathering and monitoring updates, is one of the few remaining sources of hope for victims and survivors seeking justice. We therefore urge the Council to renew these mandates. We note the progress towards establishing an OHCHR presence in Bangladesh. To be credible and responsive to demands for reforms and accountability, the Office must ensure transparency in its work and ground its engagement with the government in genuine consultation with all stakeholders. In Indonesia, violent state repression of recent protests has already led to at least 7 killings and mass arbitrary arrests. These violations, compounded by a recent spate of regressive laws and policies, signal a dangerous slide into authoritarianism. These developments underscore the vital role of the High Commissioner's public advocacy as an early warning tool to spur action to avert a human rights crisis. Finally, we are concerned about the Office's silence on India, despite mounting evidence of systematic persecution of religious minorities, repression of civil society and media, and erosion of judicial independence and the rule of law. India's candidacy for the Council's membership presents an important opportunity to scrutinize its human rights record and press for commitments for reform. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Global Sri Lankan Forum, United Kingdom.
Mr. President, as an independent NGO, we must express concern with the aspect of High Commissioner's report. While it notes challenges, it overlooks Sri Lanka's real progress. We state firmly Sri Lanka rejects any international accountability mechanism or foreign intervention. Justice and reconciliation must be delivered through domestic process within the framework of Sri Lankan Constitution and reflecting the will of our people. External imposition undermines sovereignty, democracy, and the rule of law. The report claims impunity, yet tangible progress is visible. The Office of Missing Persons and the Office for the Reparations continue to provide support to the thousands of families. To dismiss these institutions unjust to victims who benefit them. The report also ignores context, particularly LTT grave crimes, including the forced recruitments of thousands of child soldiers. Sri Lanka, with the UN support, rehabilitated and reintegrated these children, ensuring their return to society with dignity. The argument deserves recognition. What Sri Lanka requires is support for democratic institutions and technical assistance, not the imposition of external agendas. We further urge member states to reject attempts to impose international mechanisms and instead allow Sri Lanka to continue delivering justice and reconciliation through its sovereign constitutional framework. Sri Lanka welcomed the Commissioner's visit to mass grave of Shembini and Mena, but failed to visit Rupas Kulam mass grave is innocent police officers is regrettable. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to International Service for Human Rights.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, this week marks the 7th year of the unjust and arbitrary imprisonment of Uyghur Dr. Gulshan Abbas by the Chinese authorities. Dr. Abbas' story is sadly one of many. Arbitrary detention in China is systemic. The widespread arbitrary and discriminatory detention of Uyghurs was the ground for the OHCHR landmark finding of the possible crimes against humanity. High Commissioner, 3 years on from the office report, Dr. Abbas remains detained. There is no credible evidence that the human rights situation in China has improved in any meaningful way. With your global update reflecting a lack of progress despite your private engagement, what will you do differently to prevent and promote accountability of China's grave and widespread violations? The continued impunity of the Chinese government for its atrocity crimes strikes a serious blow to this Human Rights Council credibility. At the time of UN reform, if this council is unable to keep a major power in check, what signal does it send to others? It is up to this council to press for change and establish regular monitoring and reporting. We also call on you, High Commissioner, to follow up meaningfully on the OHCHR report. Anything short of this will fail us. To conclude, I have a message from Dr. Abbas' daughter, Ziba. Mom, we miss you, and your granddaughters are waiting to see you. Please stay strong. We will bring you home soon.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Amnesty International.
Mr. President, we agree with the High Commissioner that when states apply the law inconsistently, they undermine the legal order everywhere. We call on states to preserve the ability of this body to promptly respond to human rights concerns everywhere, including by ensuring adequate funding. We share the High Commissioner's concerns on numerous countries, including Myanmar, where civilians continue to be hit with airstrikes while they study, shop, gather with family and friends, or rest. The need to end the supply of arms and aviation fuel to the Myanmar military is urgent. In northern Rakhine State, Rohingya civilians are under the increasingly oppressive rule of the Arakan Army and some of the worst violence against Rohingyas since Myanmar military operations in 2017. Despite this, international aid has continued to shrink sharply, further endangering hundreds of thousands living under fragile conditions in Myanmar, in camps across the border in Bangladesh and in other countries. We welcome the High Commissioner's recognition of the crackdown on civil society and human rights defenders in Hong Kong. Our research shows that more than 80% of those targeted with national security laws were simply exercising fundamental freedoms. 90% of those prosecuted were denied bail by the courts. We also note the High Commissioner's statement that addressing violations of the rights of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, as well as of Tibetans, remains a priority for his office. 3 years since a landmark OHCHR report noted that crimes against humanity may have occurred in the region, our most recent findings indicate that repression continues. We call again on the High Commissioner to present a detailed update to this Council on his office's assessment of the situation in Xinjiang since 2022.
Merci. Je donne la parole à Chris.
Thank you. I give the floor to Christian Council International.
Takes this opportunity to contribute to the general debate. As an organization committed to the protection and promotion of life, family and freedom, we wish to emphasize the following key principles that are necessary for addressing the issues our world faces today. First, the sacredness of life, from conception to natural death, must be upheld. Life is a gift that deserves protection at every stage and under every circumstance. Second, the family, founded on the union of a man and a woman, provides the best environment for raising children. Parents hold the primary responsibility in guiding their children's education and well-being, and their role must be respected, not replaced. Third, the importance of freedom. Freedom of religion, speech and conscience allows individuals and communities to live by their faith and values. Persecution of Christians and political leaders for their beliefs is unacceptable. Freedom also belongs to nations, which must be able to make decisions in line with their cultural and moral values without external pressure. We call upon the Office of the High Commissioner to respect these principles in line with international consensus. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à African.
Thank you. I give the floor to African Green Foundation International.
Can we start again? Mr. President, we note that High Commissioner's report, but we stress that it presents an incomplete picture of Sri Lanka. The report speaks accountability but neglects the atrocities committed by the LTT, including the systematic recruitment of thousands of children as soldiers and suicide bombers. These young victims were robbed of their childhoods. Sri Lanka, with UN support, rehabilitated and reintegrated them, a success story in child protection rarely acknowledged in these halls. The report alleged impunity, yet decisive action has been taken. Senior officials accused of abuse have been removed or prosecuted. Emblematic cases have advanced, and landmark anti-corruption convictions show clear shift towards accountability. The Office of the Missing Person and the Office for Repatriation have delivered tangible support to thousands of families. To dismiss this progress is unfair to victims who benefit from this mechanism. Claims of ongoing repression, exaggerated, isolated incident while ignoring inclusive governance, peaceful commemoration, and significant land released in the north and the east. External calls for parallel accountability structure undermine Sri Lanka's democracy and disregard the people's mandate of nationally-led reconciliation. Genuine progress comes from the strengthening domestic institutions, not imposing external agendas. Sri Lanka has endured.
I give the floor to Madre Inc.
Mr. President, High Commissioner, and distinguished delegates, good afternoon. The Afghanistan LGBTIQ+ organization ALO welcomes the recent UN High Commissioner's urgent call to halt the forcible returns of Afghans. They face pushback and deportation from wealthy countries as well as from neighboring countries. In the first 7 months of 2025, at least 1.9 million Afghan refugees have been returned or pushed out of Iran and Pakistan. Iran has deported nearly 1.5 million Afghans since the start of 2025 and a single-day record of 43,000 people on 1st of July. Children comprise roughly 1/4 of those deported. Such collective expulsions violate international law. Sending people back to a country where they face persecution or torture breaches the core principle of non-refoulement. Afghans are enduring dehumanization and abuse as part of mass expulsions. Iranian officials have been reportedly destroyed Afghan refugee valid visa documents before deporting them. Many deportees, including women and even the elderly, have suffered beatings and other horrific mistreatment by the Iranian authorities. We urge the international community to immediately halt the forcibly deportation of Afghan refugees and asylum seekers and uphold obligations under international law to protect them from persecution, and increase humanitarian support to Afghan civil society organizations and international organizations providing life-saving assistance to returnees so that deported Afghans have access to shelter, food, and protection. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Women in Sea Committee.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the High Commissioner for his update on human rights situation. We express our deep concern over the sharp rise in politically motivated executions in Islamic Republic of Iran. These executions constitute a severe and systematic assault on human rights designed to silence dissent, suppress opposition, and instill a climate of fear. In the month of August alone, 173 individuals were executed in Iran. From the beginning of 2025 until the end of August, 972 people, including 31 women, have been executed. These executions have disproportionately targeted women, juvenile offenders, ethnic and religious minorities, and political opponents. On July 27, 2025, political prisoners Behruz Ehsani and Mehdi Hassani were executed in Ghazal Hisar prison solely for their support of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. Like the High Commissioner, we firmly believe that the death penalty is irreconcilable with human dignity, and we call an immediate halt to these executions.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Global Action on Aging for a joint statement.
Mr. President, we strongly believe that the current liquidity crisis of the United Nations must not be followed by crippling cuts in the program budget to be adopted by the General Assembly for the year 2026. Instead, we need to explore methods for maintaining or even increasing the regular budget of the UN in order to have all mandates implemented. During the UN liquidity crisis of the 1980s and 1990s, important proposals were made to revise the UN budget scale with a more even distribution of the assessed contributions in order to make the UN less dependent on contributions from any single member state. Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme advocated this at the 1985 General Assembly. The Commission on Global Governance, as well as the South Centre, made similar proposals in the 1990s, and recently it was reiterated by a former president of the UN General Assembly. While we welcome the High Commissioner's call for a cross-regional movement to defend the international system, it must be based on defending the UN Charter principles and should not lead to an increased dependency of the UN on voluntary contributions or role of philanthropies. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Réseau Unité pour le Développement de Mauritanie.
We urgently draw your attention to the deteriorating human rights situation in the Tindouf camps in Algeria, where Sahrawis have been living for nearly 5 decades under conditions of systematic repressions and deprivation. Residents face severe restrictions on basic freedoms, including movement, expression and assembly. Women are subjected to forced marriages, sexual abuse and servitude. Children endure indoctrination, recruitment as child soldiers, and limited access to education, reinforcing cycles of suffering and marginalization. Political dissents are brutally suppressed with documented cases of arbitrary arrest, torture and extrajudicial executions, undermining any semblance of justice or accountability. While the recent case of Safiya, a Sahrawi woman deprived of her freedom for over 19 months following family abduction, is a stark illustration of these abuses, other cases equally highlight the repressive environment, like the case of Khalil Ahmed, among many others. Algeria, as the host country, bears ultimate responsibility for the protection of human rights in these camps under international law. However, it has consistently shirked this role by delegating its authority to the armed group of Polisario. This failure enables the continuation of widespread abuses unchecked. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to Franciscans International for a joint statement.
Mr. President, we welcome the High Commissioner's recognition that the Indonesian authorities have used excessive force against protesters and express deep concern on widespread and ongoing allegations of arbitrary arrests and ill treatment of protesters, as well as the arbitrary arrest of the director of the Lokataru Foundation. During recent protests in Jakarta, Komnas HAM reported hundreds of cases of arbitrary arrest, while civil society organizations and media estimate at least 3,000 cases. Civil society also found unnecessary and excessive use of force by police, including the inappropriate and excessive use of tear gas, resulting in injuries to hundreds of protesters and posing a risk to bystanders. The government has confirmed that at least 8 people have been killed nationwide since the protests began, including 21-year-old several cases of unlawful use of force by police during other peaceful protests in 2025, including in Pati during May Day demonstrations and in West Sumatra. This disturbing trend reflects a broader authoritarian drift in Indonesia, symbolized by the Indonesian National Armed Forces Act, the proposed Criminal Procedure Code, and the revised Penal Code that was passed by the Parliament without the public's meaningful participation and provides more leeway for unsupervised power. It is imperative that protesters are able to exercise their rights to freedom of peaceful assembly, association, opinion and expression in accordance with Indonesia's obligations under international and domestic law. We call for the government of Indonesia to promptly, independently and effectively investigate the allegations of human rights violations and hold perpetrators accountable. We urge OHCHR and special procedures to monitor the situation due to the potential for further escalations. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Africa Culture International. Mr. President, our organization wishes to draw the attention of this Council to the serious human rights violations perpetrated in the Tindiff camps under the exclusive control of the armed group Polisario. The so-called Vacations in Peace program presents itself as a humanitarian initiative by this armed group, but it is propaganda manipulation. Far from offering Sahrawi children protection and rest, it is a system of coercive control over families that punishes those who dare to report abuses. The case of Inwa Mohammed indeed is revealing. Deprived of his right to join his ill mother in France, his name was arbitrarily removed from those who had benefited from the program by Polisario authorities. This is a manifest violation of the fundamental rights of the child, and in particular the rights to family unity and free circulation. These practices show that Polisario instrumentalizes minors with political ends, despite international conventions on the rights of the child. This confirms the armed and repressive nature of this organization, a non-state organization which acts with impunity on Algerian territory. We call upon the Council and other relevant UN bodies to act in order to put an end to these abusive practices and to ensure the effective protection of children abducted into the Tindiff camps. The best interest of the children cannot be sacrificed for a political agenda. I thank you kindly. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I would remind you to pay attention to the speed of your statement. If you speak too quickly, the interpreters will struggle to provide the best possible version of your speech, and that could undermine some of the content of your interpretation. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the International Commission of Jurists.
Mr. President, the ICJ condemns Israel's continued ruthless military operations in Gaza, causing irreparable harm to the Palestinian civilian population of Gaza and threatening its existence as a group. Through its mass killings and forcible transfer of civilians, its extensive destruction of civilian infrastructure, weaponization of humanitarian aid, and its use of starvation as a method of warfare, Israel has been inflicting on Palestinians in Gaza, according to OHCHR's own terms, conditions of life increasingly compatible with the continuous existing as a group in Gaza. Taken together, all of this is a strong evidence in support of the conclusion that Israel is engaging in genocide, questioned under adjudication by the International Court of Justice. With a plan to take over the entire Gaza Strip and to empty it from its entire population under the guise of voluntary relocation, the goal is clear, leaving no choice to the civilian population but to either be expelled or die. This ethnic cleansing policy appears to constitute evidence of the intent to destroy, at least in part, the Palestinian population of Gaza. Along with Israel's settlements policy in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, the takeover plan violates the integrity of the occupied Palestinian territory and the right of the Palestinians to self-determination. The ICJ calls on all the states to act to stop and prevent Israel's criminal conduct, and the ICJ reiterates its call for the immediate and unconditional release of all remaining hostages. Thank you.
Merci,
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Watch.
Mr. President, in Ethiopia, conflicts in Amhara and Oromia regions are having a devastating impact on civilians, with reports of summary executions, arbitrary detention and attacks on aid workers and critical infrastructure. The government's transitional justice process has stalled, leaving little hope for meaningful justice for survivors of atrocities. The government has significantly suppressed the media and civil society, shuttering space for criticism before national elections. We call on the OHCHR to report publicly and this Council to renew its scrutiny on Ethiopia. Across China, repression has intensified, including the dismantling of freedoms in Hong Kong and forced cultural assimilation in Tibet. 3 years since the landmark OHCHR report on Xinjiang, crimes against humanity against Uyghurs continue. Determined follow-up by this Council and OHCHR is urgently needed. As the UN financial crisis threatens the work of this Council and OHCHR, states should urgently address the failure to pay or late payment of UN contributions in a context of long-term chronic underfunding of the human rights pillar. While the US, then China, bear the greatest responsibility for the current financial shortfall, 72 countries haven't paid their UN contributions for 2025, among them some Council members. Efficiency measures should not jeopardise the Council's effectiveness nor delivery of its mandate, including responding to human rights emergencies. Prevention, protection and justice cannot wait until the financial crisis blows over. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to Ocaprese.
Señor Presidente,
Ocapros International thanks the High Commissioner for the valuable and detailed report on the great challenges faced in different parts of the world in the area of human rights. We call upon the office to remain an important source of information on matters surrounding the rights of the protection of human rights. Our organization reports the alarming situation suffered by human rights defenders in different parts of the world, and primarily the Sahrawi human rights defenders in the Tindouf camps that suffer from torture, harassment. 50 years have passed with them subjected to all manner of violations, intimidation, oversight, execution, enforced disappearance by the Polisario authorities. All human rights defenders are subjected to this with a media blockade. This deprives or prevents all reporting of the activities that could be taken against these crimes and injustices and impunities by the Polisario authorities. Our organization is calling upon this Honorable Council. The time has come to put an end to the Polisario abuses. There must be a peaceful solution, that is to say autonomy proposed by Morocco's, which will protect human rights defenders and guarantee a dignified life to Sahrawi people. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole à Sylvie.
Thank you. I give the floor to Civicus.
Mr. President, Civicus remains deeply concerned about the human rights situation in DRC. Despite the ceasefire agreed in Washington and Doha, the human rights situation in the country has worsened due to renewed clashes between government forces and armed groups, including the Rwandan-supported M23 in eastern areas. Reports document hundreds of summary executions by M23 and DRC-backed Wazalendo group in July, along with rape and torture. Freedom of expression and media face significant threats. Journalists encounter intimidation, arbitrary detention and torture. M23 rebels threaten journalists and activists in controlled territories, forcing many to relocate. The cases of Tuvir Wundu, detained by the DRC's intelligence agency in Kinshasa, and Amisi Musada Emerite, abducted and tortured for reporting on the conflict, highlight the danger media professionals encounter. Freedom of association and assembly is severely curtailed. CSO are banned from gathering in rebel-controlled areas like Goma and Bukavu. The government's suspension of PPRD political party for alleged rebel collaboration further impacts these freedoms. We urge the Council to address these violations and support civic space restoration in DRC, particularly in North Kivu, South Kivu and Ituri provinces. We call for increased protection of journalists and HRDs and for all conflict parties to respect international humanitarian law and human rights obligations. Furthermore, we call on states to support, including through adequate funding, the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry with a view to ending impunity. We thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Research League. Video.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mariam Hassani. I am the daughter of Mehdi Hassani, a 48-year-old father of 3, who was put to death in the Islamic Republic of Iran for the sole reason of loving his people. My father believed in the Iranian people's right to live with equality and dignity. For this reason, he was an activist in the opposition. His only desire was freedom for his people. My father and his friend Behruz Ehsani were sentenced to death on trumped-up charges. They were tortured and their trial only lasted 5 minutes. On the 27th of July, they were both executed by the Iranian government. My father's only crime was membership in the opposition group People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. He was a man of conscience, he was a prisoner of conscience, and he was executed for the sole reason of not bending the knee to the will of tyrants. My father, like thousands of men and women before him, stood firm in his belief in freedom for the people of Iran. I ask of the Human Rights Council to condemn the ever-increasing number of executions in Iran. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Action pour la protection et la défense des droits de l'homme for a joint statement.
We want to point out for last 16 years for the success report, High Commissioner forgot to mention Tamil who are victim of genocide in Tamil Eelam. In north and east of Sri Lankan, enforced disappeared family members are waiting for their loved one. Instead of found a solution, this council member continued to support the militants of Tamil Eelam by Sri Lankan military, while IMF and European Council continue to support with the GSP+. The Chamani massacre in Jaffna, where over 200 such human remains have been recovered so far, making Chamani for the 17th officially recorded massacre in Tamil Eelam, which need international mechanism inquiry. This month, we commemorate Tyagadivam Dileepan, who lost his life, who fasted and sacrificed his life without food and water for 12 days and died. And that 38 years later, Tamil civil society were on the street with the same request for stop the occupation and the unitary state system in the Eelam denies Tamil's nationalhood, sovereignty and Tamil right to self-determination. We request the council member appoint a country specific special procedures mentor holder for Sri Lanka, refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court for the accountability for war crime and genocide. Thank you. Nandri.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Maloka International. Thank you, President. My name is Arturo Suarez. I am one of the 252 Venezuelan migrants that had been kidnapped illegally and without justification in El Salvador. As a direct victim, I would like to report the arbitrary detention, torture, and enforced disappearance to which we were subjected. At no time were we informed of the crime we committed, or were we allowed to have contact. The inhumane and degrading treatment to which we're subjected are serious human rights violations. They must be condemned by all. For this reason, we call for a firm statement to be made by your office which condemns the illegal actions of the Salvadoran government and that calls for the end to all measures that put into jeopardy freedom and human rights of Venezuelan migrants. To migrate is not a crime. Thank you very much.
Merci. Je donne la parole à...
Thank you. I recognize Association Culture Femmes for a video statement.
Chair, for the past 16 years, successive reports from the Commissioner has consistently failed to recognize Tamils as victims of genocide. In the north and east of Sri Lanka, families of the forcibly disappeared are still waiting for answers about their loved ones. Instead of seeking justice and solutions, this council has allowed the continued militarization of these regions by the Sri Lankan military. The IMF and the European Council continue their support of Sri Lanka through GSP+. During the genocidal war against the Tamil people, 146,679 individuals were unaccounted for in the Vani region alone, just from October 2008 to May 2009. To this day, Tamils living under Sri Lankan military occupation continue to face harassment, intimidation, and arbitrary arrest under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, simply for protesting or raising their voices for fundamental rights. As long as the unitary state system prevails in Sri Lanka, it will continue to deny Tamils their nationhood, sovereignty, and right to self-determination. High Commissioner, due to the war crimes and crimes of genocide committed against Tamils for decades, shouldn't you be recommending to the member states to appoint a country-specific special procedures mandate holder for Sri Lanka and refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court?
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Esini.
Señor Comisario, en noviembre Brasil...
In November of last year, Brazil will be receiving the COP30 in the Amazon. We need urgent decisions and structural decisions if we're to save the planet. But Brazil is coming to the COP with the biggest setback in environmental policy. The demarcation of indigenous lands is the primary policy of environmental collapse. But in Brazil, we continue to see Law 14701 in place. This clearly is unconstitutional, and it opens up indigenous areas to economic exploitation by third parties, undermining the rights of the indigenous people of their territory. In environmental matters, Congress wants to put an end to environmental protection. The government is moving forward in mining and oil projects, altering the rivers for mining and other exploitative activities. The Brazilian government signed a pact for environmental transformation, which they will present in the COP. However, the realities are that there are setbacks and slippage in the commitments taken on. Brazil is going through a fundamental time in the defense of its democracy, and the guarantee of territorial lands for indigenous peoples is a fundamental matter for consolidating democracy in the country. We call for the High Commissioner's Office to continue to work to ensure that the Brazilian state lives up to its international commitments and constitutional obligations and human rights, and that it overturn the temporary law, and that it return to a path of political of policy protection for environment and territory. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à Alliance.
Thank you. Alliance Creative Community Project also has a video statement.
President, we remain deeply concerned about the unresolved fate of thousands of civilians who perished during Sri Lanka's 3-decade civil war, particularly in its final phase, where credible sources have reported large-scale civilian casualties and allegations of grave international crimes. 15 years on, the absence of comprehensive, transparent investigations continues to undermine public trust, reconciliation efforts, and the rights of victims' families to truth and justice. Survivors continue to endure the lasting effects of trauma, displacement, and economic marginalization, while opportunities for remembrance are often curtailed. We respectfully urge the government of Sri Lanka to facilitate independent, internationally assisted investigations into all suspected mass grave sites, guarantee the protection of witnesses, journalists, and human rights defenders, ensure that affected families may commemorate their loved ones without fear or restriction, engage meaningfully with communities in any transitional justice process. Sustainable peace requires truth, accountability, and non-recurrence. We call on this Council and Member States to support these measures. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à lawyer.
Thank you. Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada has the floor.
السيد الرئيس يسورنا أن التقرير بشأن حالة حقوق الإنسان في سريلانكا يشير إلى اقتراف فظائع. هناك انتهاكات ما في ذلك الحجاز التعسفي والموت في أثناء الاحتجاز وتنفيذ القوانين مناهضة الإرهاب، لا سيما تطبيقها بحق التميل والمسلمين. وعلى الرغم من الوعود المتعددة لإلغاء هذه القوانين لا يزال هؤلاء يعتقلوا دون تهم. ما في ذلك هؤلاء
for justice. Of particular concern is the tens of thousands that remain unaccounted for, despite the continuous funding of the Office on Missing Persons. Human rights defenders and families searching for truth on accountability for enforced disappearances face relentless surveillance, intimidation, and harassment by security agencies. These patterns of intimidation extend to ongoing efforts to investigate mass graves, including in Chennai, where over 200 bodies have been uncovered. These realities underscore what victims and civil society have long made clear. Domestic mechanisms are incapable of delivering justice for atrocity crimes committed in Sri Lanka. We urge the Human Rights Council to renew the Sri Lanka Accountability Project and support international efforts to end impunity and deliver justice for victims and survivors in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. World Jewish Congress now has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the High Commissioner has stated, anti-Semitism is growing around the world. Places of worship are attacked, cemeteries are vandalized, and children are walking to school under armed protection. People are even targeted and shot on the streets of major cities simply for being Jewish. Such violence is intolerable. It is never only a Jewish problem. It reveals a fracture in democracy and in institutions meant to protect it. When Jews are attacked, the credibility of our human rights framework is at stake. Too often, hatred is met with silence. This must end. The world of sports is not spared by this threat. The exhibition Sports Crowd's Power, now on view in the Salle des Pas Perdus, is sponsored by the mission of Germany, the OHCHR, and the World Jewish Congress, reveals how sport was used by the Nazi regime to promote anti-Semitic ideology and exclude Jewish athletes. Delegates are invited to reflect on these troubling legacies and their impact today. It underscores the urgent need to confront hatred in all its forms and the shared duty to prevent history from repeating itself. Protecting Jewish communities is about more than their safety. It's about the strength of democracy itself. Confronting anti-Semitism is fortifying human rights for all. This Council must treat anti-Semitism not as a side issue, but as a central test of its resolve. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à Global.
Thank you. A Global Appreciation and Skills Training Network is given the floor by video.
Dear President, the recent discovery of a mass grave in Chemini, northern Sri Lanka, is a chilling reminder of the country's unresolved legacy of war and atrocity. Since February 2025, 240 skeletons have been unearthed, including the remains of infants and children. These findings cannot be viewed in isolation, as they are rooted in decades of armed conflict, enforced disappearances, and entrenched impunity. For families who have searched for their loved ones for over a decade, Chemini represents both profound grief and a renewed call for truth. Hundreds of families whose loved ones disappeared have never received a confirmation of death or any other form of closure, much less compensation. Yet, the history of halted excavations at Mannar and other sites raises grave concerns of potential cover-ups. We therefore urge the United Nations, member states, and international human rights bodies to ensure a transparent, independent investigation with neutral country representatives. The evidence uncovered constitutes clear indicators of genocide against the Tamil people, who have been seeking justice for over 16 years. Establishing a mandate for Sri Lanka, such as the independent investigate mechanism for Myanmar, as has been advocated for in the past, may allow these crimes to be addressed. We further call upon willing states to pursue accountability under the Genocide Convention by initiating proceedings before the International Court of Justice. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à International.
Thank you. International Women's is given the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable High Commissioner, we commend the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for its continued commitment to upholding human rights globally. However, we are deeply concerned that one of the most urgent and long-standing human rights crises, the situation in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, continues to remain unreported and unaddressed. Today, over 3,000 Kashmiris, including prominent political leaders Masrat Alam, Yasin Malik, Shabir Ahmad Shah, Asha Indrabi, Nahida Nasreen, Hamida Sufi, and many others remain illegally detained under draconian laws like the Public Safety Act and the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. They are kept in prolonged solitary confinement, detained, and have denied fair trial, and many have been shifted to different prisons across India. We urgently call upon your office to conduct an updated assessment of the ongoing violations, demand the immediate release of all political prisoners, and press upon India to allow access to United Nations special procedures and independent observers. The continuous silence only deepens the suffering of millions and denies Kashmiris their...
Merci. Je donne la parole.
Thank you. I now give thought to the World Muslim Congress.
Mr. President and Excellency High Commissioner, World Muslim Congress respectfully urges you to place the situation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir at the center of your concern. 70 years long military occupation, unilateral application of Article 370 and 35A, the verification of the state and the imposition of settler colonial laws without the consent of its people can be termed as constitutional terrorism. Today, the repression has entered a new phase, the deliberate erasure of Kashmir's history, memory, and Muslim identity. Authorities have banned books, including works on Kashmir resistance and Islamic thoughts. Newspaper archives have been wiped from official websites, and entire digital repository of human rights documentation has vanished. These acts are not merely censorship, they are calculated attempts to sever Kashmiris from their past and legitimize their struggle. When archives disappear, so does the evidence of enforced disappearance, mass graves, pallet victims, and sexual violence. We ask you to deploy a full weight of your mandate, demand immediate restoration of Kashmir's archives, press India to allow unfettered access to UN special procedures, initiate a time-bound investigation into the systematic destruction of cultural and historical records. Without memory, there can be no justice, and without justice, no peace. And peace in South Asia is rooted in the realization of Kashmiri's right to self-determination. I thank you.
Merci. Je passe la parole à I.
Thank you. Ichanaklo now has the floor.
Mr. President, the armed entities commit serious violations of human rights against civilians and in some cases with assistance from sponsor states. This has taken place for years in the Sahrawi refugee camps in the south of Algeria, where the Polisario commits systematic violations and crimes against the population, and the Algerian army doesn't hesitate to shoot those who try to flee repression, killing, slavery, human trafficking. And the Polisario leadership uses starvation to punish those who criticize the serious situation of human rights in the camps, where they are denied of humanitarian assistance, baby formula, and gas that are usurped by the Polisario leaders, who are the main provider of fuel and food in the Sahel region, in full view of the host country, Algeria. Therefore, we call on you and also other human rights mechanisms to ensure direct protection for the detainees in the Tenduf camps and to put an end to lawless and impunity endured by the population of these camps. Thank you.
Merci. L'association.
Thank you. Association Pay is absent, so Réveil Communautaire has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand before you on behalf of the civil society to denounce a grave and deliberate crime against humanity. Pakistan demographic engineering in the territory of Azad Jammu Kashmir and Gilbert-Baltistan. This is not a political act, it's a systematic campaign to erase indigenous identity and violate fundamental human rights. Peaceful activists like Baba Jan are in prison and tortured simply for defending their home. Families are displaced as Pakistan seizes lands under the guise of development and handing them over to outsider and military-linked companies. The 2018 Gilbert-Baltistan order, imposed without consent, stripped local communities of their land and voice. The planned settlement of Sunni population in Shia majority areas is a worrying attempt to alter the region's ethnic fabric, an act of ethnic cleansing, a violation of the Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Peaceful protests are being suppressed systematically. Communities live in fear as their land, forest, and livelihood are stolen. The protests in Shadrock and Gilbert are desperate cries for justice met with repression and silence. Mr. President, this is a human rights crisis at utmost importance. It is a direct attack of the existence of the people in EGK and GB. We urge the Honorary Council to request Pakistan to grant immediate and unheralded access to facts.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Al Hakim Foundation.
Mr. President, we welcome the oral update by the High Commissioner, and I would like to focus on the Western Sahara case, which remains one of the outstanding cases or questions in the region. We are concerned about the continued Moroccan occupation of the Western Sahara and rejection of compliance with UN resolutions. The Sahrawi people continue to suffer from flagrant and heinous violations for more than half a century. We call for ending this impunity enjoyed by Moroccan officials until this date. I'm one of the survivors of forced disappearance, and we would like to note with concern that the OHCHR requested a visit for the Western Sahara, but Morocco is yet to positively respond. This rejection demonstrates that Morocco wants to escape any independent monitoring, and this increases risks regarding the situation of human rights for the Sahrawi people. We call on the implementation of the resolution of Security Council and General Assembly on the Western Sahara, including a referendum for self-determination of the Sahrawi people. We also call for supporting the peaceful struggle of our people. We reiterate the important role of the OHCHR in monitoring human rights violations in the Western Sahara and urging the Moroccan authorities to respect its international obligations so as to achieve stability.
International pour le développement.
Thank you. The promotion of development pour le développement is recognized. Thank you.
Sapala.
Agence internationale pour le développement is absent.
Mr. President, I come before this council representing the International Agency for Development on behalf of our Lord to report serious human rights violations committed in the Tindouf camps under the control of the armed group, the Polisario Front, and with the complicity of the host country, Algeria. The case of the person I represent is not an isolated case, nor is it exceptional. It is part of a much broader and painful systematic violation of human rights in which women and girls have been subjected to physical and sexual and psychological abuse. In a climate marked by an absence of liberty or judicial guarantees or effective due process, women such as my client have decided to raise their voice in the face of this impunity. There is a sign of the urgent need for the international community to take on its responsibilities. This council has the obligation of listening to, recognizing, and acting on these serious violations. Human rights cannot fluctuate depending on political state of affairs, nor who happens to be in power. Before the UN Human Rights Council, we call for the following. First, the formal recognition of Khalil Mohammed as victim of sexual violence in the Tindouf camp. Second, the international condemnation of the actions of the Polisario and its leaders.
La parole à PDS.
Thank you. I give the floor to PDS.
Thank the High Commissioner for his report and for the attention devoted to the situations of vulnerable populations deprived of their fundamental rights. In this context, our organization wishes to recall the alarming situation of the Sahrawi refugees in the Tindouf camps in Algeria, which has persisted for nearly 50 years. These refugees live in a protracted exile marked by extreme climatic conditions, almost total dependence on humanitarian aid, and exclusion from national development policies. As highlighted by recent reports of UN agencies, health and education infrastructures remain extremely fragile. Beyond the humanitarian emergency, we remain deeply concerned about serious and persistent human rights violations, including arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, torture, child exploitation, and systematic abuses against women. Mr. High Commissioner, we call upon your office and this council to urge Algeria to fully cooperate with UNHCR and the Council's special procedures, reiterate the urgent need for an independent census in the Tindouf camps, ensure effective access of UN mechanisms and NGOs to the Tindouf camps, guarantee the protection of human rights defenders and Sahrawi dissidents' voices against all forms of reprisals. The dignity, security, and future of tens of thousands of refugees depend on the effective implementation of these recommendations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
Thank you. Sustainable Development Enable is absent. Fondation Secours Humanitaire has the floor.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
President, members of the Council, Secours Humanitaire is a Geneva foundation which has an urgent call to you regarding the Gaza Strip, where 2 million people are living in a blockade in inhumane conditions. Repeated bombing have destroyed entire districts, hospitals, vital infrastructure for the population. However, this blockade has closed all checkpoints, creating an even more devastating crisis. Access to food, drinking water, and medication is almost impossible. Children are dying of hunger. Women are giving birth without assistance. Entire families are deprived of any dignity. This tramples the fundamental rights recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We affirm the fundamental principle according to which every human being is worthy of protection and assistance and should not be reduced to a simple pawn in a geopolitical game. Our foundation urges the Council to urge for the immediate opening of checkpoints to allow humanitarian aid to be delivered. Palestinians are not just numbers, they are people, children, women, and their suffering should be a cause of concern for all of us. It is urgent that we act immediately. Our humanity is indivisible. It is our duty to protect it. Thank you.
Merci. Ceci était.
Thank you. That was the last statement which we are able to listen to during this session. Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I understand that some delegations have requested to exercise their right to respond on agenda item 2. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the UAE. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. The UAE takes the floor to exercise its right of reply and express its categorical and unequivocal rejection of the baseless accusations made during the interactive dialogue with the IFFM on Sudan by the concerned representative. The UAE has been unequivocal. It has not provided and is not providing any support to the warring parties in Sudan since the outbreak of the civil war in April 2023. The UAE has conveyed this directly to the UN, and it is reflected in the latest report of the UN Security Council's panel of experts on Sudan, which provides no support to these heinous allegations and makes no findings against the UAE, and is a testament to the baselessness of these claims. Mr. President, the UAE has consistently underlined the need to ensure accountability for violations committed by all warring parties in Sudan. Attempts to divert attention and responsibility cannot be accepted. UN reports are clear that atrocities and war crimes are being perpetrated by both the warring parties. And yet, we continue to see efforts to evade accountability. The so-called National Committee to Investigate Crimes and Violations has gone to great lengths to underplay any atrocities or crimes committed by the Port Sudan Authority. The focus of the committee and its proceedings has undertaken an extremely biased and in favor of one of the warring parties, the party represented in this chamber. I'd like to remind everyone in this room that neither of the warring parties represents the true will and wishes of the Sudanese people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
I thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Mr. President, we take the floor today to respond to certain delegations that have made remarks regarding India. We are compelled, once again, to address provocations from a country whose own leadership recently likened it to a dump truck, perhaps an inadvertently apt metaphor for a state that continues to deposit recycled falsehoods and stale propaganda before this distinguished council. Pakistan's systematic abuse of this forum, coupled with its routine manipulation of the OIC as its mouthpiece, has become a familiar pattern. Its pathological fixation on India appears to provide it with existential validation. Yet, we must respond, lest we forget. Lest we forget the carnage of Pahalgam, where Pakistan-sponsored terrorists turned a meadow of joy into a killing field in April this year. Lest we forget 9/11, as the world marks its anniversary tomorrow, even as we witness today the hypocrisy of those who sheltered its mastermind and glorified him as a martyr. Lest we forget Pulwama, Uri, Pathankot, Mumbai. The list is endless, Mr. President. Yet, Pakistan demonstrates the audacity to take the floor today, feigning moral outrage while continuing to finance and shelter the very networks that threaten global security. The international community recognizes this charade for what it is. The world will not forget. India will not forget. Our measured and proportionate response to the Pahalgam attack made that sufficiently clear. We need no lessons from a terror sponsor, no sermons from a persecutor of minorities, no advice from a state that has squandered its own credibility. Mr. President, India will continue to protect its citizens with unwavering resolve. We will defend our sovereignty without compromise. And we will continue to expose, time and again, the elaborate deception of a failed state whose survival depends upon trafficking in terror and tragedy. Mr. President, we would also like to respond to the surprising, shallow and ill-informed remarks made by Switzerland, a close friend and partner. As it holds the UNHRC presidency, it is all the more important for Switzerland to avoid wasting the Council's time with narratives that are blatantly false and do not do justice to the reality of India. Instead, it should focus on its own challenges, such as racism, systematic discrimination, and xenophobia. As the world's largest, most diverse, and vibrant democracy, with a civilizational embrace of pluralism, India remains ready to help Switzerland address these concerns. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sudan.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you.
الرد على ما ورد.
I thank you, Mr. President.
وعرقلة الحلول.
We have been accused of not living up to our responsibilities and of being involved in actions that lack veracity. Sudan is taking the floor to shed light on the role played by Abu Dhabi in my country. We call upon you to, we call for efforts to be made in step with international law and to not be involved in domestic affairs for the representative of the East Development. And it is clear that that organization is adopting the same positions as the rebel militias. And this, not other militias. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China. Thank you, President. Some certain countries such as France, Austria,
编造、散布虚假信息。Interpretation. 没有啊。
Please continue your statement.
攻击抹黑中国，中方。
These countries continue to attack China. China is adhering to the principles of equality for all before the law. We apply a national policy that is based on equality of nationalities and national unity, and guaranteeing also fundamental freedoms of all, addressing the behavior of illegal criminals. Currently, Xinjiang and other areas are enjoying freedom of religious beliefs for different ethnicities and the right to use their languages and characters. China has a firm position on the report on the evaluation of Xinjiang. It is illegal and invalid. The Human Rights Council has already categorically refused the draft decision on Xinjiang. It's not even worth discussing it. The affairs in Hong Kong are strictly a domestic matter for China and cannot be interfered upon by exterior forces. The implementation on the law and national security of Hong Kong and the security agreements has brought stability, and the rights of the citizens are effectively guaranteed. The concerned countries must respect the principles of the United Nations Charter and the sovereignty of China, also ensuring that that anti-Chinese elements are not allowed to perturb Hong Kong. They're addressing issues of the sovereignty of nations and normal judicial cooperation. These countries continue to attack and slander China, while not addressing that which they and their allies do. They ignore the fact that the United States is withdrawing from the organizations, withdrawing investments, affects the U.S. and refuses to participate in the UN and refuses to participate in human rights reviews, and remaining indifferent to the suffering of the Palestinian people. These are this gives clarity of domestic violence. They close their eyes regarding drug abuse, domestic violence, and racial discrimination, violation of migrant rights, and religious hatred, allowing for these human rights abuses. while meddling in the affairs of other countries, imposing measures that are the unilateral coercive measures that violate the human rights of millions of people in other countries. China, particularly in developing countries, China urges these countries to observe international human rights principles. Thank you very much.
Merci. Collègues, comme les
Thank you, colleagues. As the interpreters do not always have written texts before them, please kindly slow down the delivery of your speeches. I give the floor at this time to the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation would like to make the first right of reply to the allegations made by France and Australia, which are based on distortions and fabrications. At every session of this Council, some Western countries raise unfounded issues concerning human rights in our country. This practice is nothing more than an extension of the United States' hostile policy towards the DPRK and has nothing to do with the genuine commitment to the promotion and protection of the human rights. It is regrettable that these countries presume to speak on the human rights situations of others at their own will, while serious and massive violations of international concern are committed daily within their own borders. Even at this very moment, phenomena such as racial discrimination, xenophobia, and hate speech, glorification of neo-Nazism, ill treatment and discrimination of minorities, gun-related violence, unemployment, human trafficking, and other social ills continue to prevail on the ground. Yet, these countries have never openly acknowledged nor sincerely addressed their own grave human rights violations. Instead, they persist in naming, shaming, and criticizing other sovereign states for political purposes and interfere in their internal affairs. If these countries are truly concerned about human rights, they should begin by addressing the widespread abuses within their own societies and take meaningful steps to remedy them. Unless and until such action is taken, their proclaimed concern about human rights will remain nothing more than hypocrisy. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la
Thank you. Give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand.
Mr. President, although we had no intention of bringing this bilateral matter into this Council's debate, allow me to briefly respond to the statement made by the distinguished delegate of Cambodia. It is regrettable that we are confronted with the current situation at the Thailand-Cambodia border, one that Thailand neither sought nor stands to benefit from in any way. It is a conflict that Thailand did not initiate. To date, 5 Thai soldiers have lost their legs from landmines incidents in July and August, in clear violation of the Ottawa Convention. Furthermore, 150,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Thailand reaffirms our unwavering commitment to the ceasefire reached by the 2 leaders on 28th of July through the good offices of Malaysia as ASEAN chair, as well as to the peaceful settlement of disputes through existing bilateral channels conducted in good faith in the spirit of good neighborliness and ASEAN solidarity. We believe this is the only way forward to prevent further escalation, rebuild mutual trust, and achieve lasting peace. Concerning the 18 Cambodian prisoners of war, this occurred during renewed hostilities initiated by Cambodia during the breach of the ceasefire. The Thai authorities have been taking care of them fully in accordance with international humanitarian and human rights law. Thailand granted access to the representatives of the ICRC in Bangkok twice to visit them. The ICRC delegation spoke freely with the POWs in private, conducted a physical checkup, and established links with families of the POWs in Cambodia. All 18 Cambodian POWs are allowed to receive and send Red Cross messages from and to the families through the Red Cross Society network. Their detention is not a form of punishment, but rather to prevent them from being forced to re-engage in the conflict. Thailand is committed to ensuring dignified and human treatment in conformity with international standards until conditions allow for their repatriation upon the true cessation of hostilities as stipulated by the Third Geneva Convention. We reiterate the importance of the principle of truth, sincerity, and goodwill. It is crucial that Cambodia refrain from further action to spread false information that will inflame tensions and provoke conflict. We will work closely with the international community with full respect for international human rights and humanitarian law. Lastly, we welcome the constructive outcome of the first special meeting of the General Border Committee between Thailand and Cambodia concluded today. We are hopeful that it will pave the way for positive developments, resumption of cooperation, and de-escalation of violence. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to exercise the right of reply following the statement by the representative of the East and Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Network while commenting on the update on the annual report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That statement contained a number of claims that are erroneous, misleading, or misconstrued. The United Republic of Tanzania fully upholds its obligations under the Constitution, as well under the regional and international human rights instruments to which it is a party. Citizens in Tanzania fully enjoy their fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right to express themselves and to share their opinions, even when these involve criticism of the government. We reiterate, Mr. President, as a mature democracy, Tanzania has consistently held regular, peaceful, and orderly elections. Never at any time has Tanzania failed to hold elections as required by the Constitution. Of course, we are cognizant of the fact that with a population of more than 60 million, it is natural that isolated incidents might occur. However, it is important to stress that elections in Tanzania have never been a destabilizing factor. I therefore wish to reassure this Council that the forthcoming general elections in October 2025 will follow the same democratic tradition. Mr. President, although we strongly contest the generalizations contained in the accusations, Tanzania takes all allegations of human rights violations seriously. The government has openly committed itself to investigate all such concerns through the competent national institutions, and where violations are established, those responsible will be held accountable. We urge our colleagues to be patient, as rushed justice is contrary to the established human rights traditions. It is equally important to acknowledge the progress achieved over the past years, which is evident in Tanzania's human rights jurisprudence and in its legislative history. The government has taken the progressive measures to advance human rights and democracy, including strengthening free, fair, inclusive, and transparent electoral practices. Our ongoing review of the criminal justice system, efforts to enhance women's empowerment, and the expansion of legal aid to marginalized groups further demonstrate our determination to uphold rule of law, accountability, and human rights protections. Finally, allow me to recall that one of the fundamental pillars of Tanzania's foreign policy is its commitment to multilateralism and international cooperation. As expressly stated in the recently adopted foreign policy, and I quote, Tanzania shall collaborate with the United Nations in pursuit of international economic development, peace, and security. Having so stated, Mr. President, Tanzania remains determined to uphold human rights and the rule.
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. This was the last statement we have the time to listen to during this session. We will come back here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at 1500 hours in order to continue with our right to reply and to undertake our interactive dialogue with a special rapporteur on the promotion of truth. And then we'll have an interactive dialogue with the special rapporteur on the right to development. I thank the interpreters again for their indulgence, as well as the technicians. I adjourn this